Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the December 10th, 2019 Planning and Zoning meeting. If you can have roll call, Shannon, please.
Messina.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Ingalls.
Here.
Lutrip.
Here.
Mandel. Here. Rumpler. Ward.
Here.
Okay, if we can all stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have approval of minutes. We have 3 sets. We'll start with the November 6th.
Motion to approve the November 6th.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
I have minutes for November 12th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
I have November 18th set of minutes.
Move approval?
Second.
I have a first and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Excuse me. Can everyone hear me? At this time, it'll be public comments, which would be anything that you'd like to come up and talk about at the podium, besides what's on our agenda today for our public hearings. That our sign-up sheets are over there on the table if you want to come up and talk about anything else that is not on the agenda. Okay, moving on. Commissioner comments? Yes.
Go ahead.
I would like to say something tonight, and I would tell you that on the first and third Tuesdays of the month, in this very chair that I'm sitting in up here, Ron Edinger sits here, and he's been serving the city of Coeur d'Alene. He's been mayor and he's been city council member for 50 years. 50 years. That's pretty incredible. He's retiring at the end of the month, and I sure hope that tonight he's doing something better than watching us. But just in case you've got the TV turned on, Ron, and you're watching us, I'd just like to say thank you for your service.
I would echo that as well. Lynn, you had a comment?
I'm making a public announcement. You might see this appear on your front stoop. It's from the TDS fiber optic folks, and this is a notice to tell you that they will be trenching into your house. And we survived a vista this summer, redoing all our gas lines, and now they're tearing us up again and marking us again. But just want to warn everybody, and if you have a really fancy landscaping, you might want to take pictures and mark where your sprinklers are. But this is just a warning. I'm seeing a lot of chatter going on, and it's coming. Just wish we had Smurf tubes into every single house so we could avoid this, but c'est la vie.
I thank you for that, because I went through that in my neighborhood where they came out and they dug and they trenched, and I called and asked if they were going to put back everything the way it was before they came out, and they did not.
Más o menos.
Made a few more calls, and they finally did come out, so I echo what you're saying. Keep that number
Take pictures.
so that they do what they say they're going to do and
Right.
such.
Well, on that, Mr. Chairman, they've come through my neighborhood. They're there right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I found them to be efficient. I saw them tear up different ones. I saw them put it back together.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to one of the crew, and I had a little chit-chat and asked where they were from. And it was early in the morning, and he sort of snickered, and he said, Florida. So it's just interesting to see that we've got people here from warmer climes in the wintertime. Usually it's the other way around. But I found that they were, what the ones that worked in our area were very good.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
That's it? We're good?
I didn't get that on the record, my gosh.
As they say, keep the number. All right, staff comments. Go ahead, Hillary.
Good evening, commissioners. So just a few updates for you. So for January, we did not get any development applications, but we are looking to bring forward some code amendments to you. So we'll keep you posted on that, looking at amending some sections of the zoning code, one related to home occupation, another one related to storage of heavy equipment in yards, and then another one potentially we might be bringing forward the design review procedures amendment. So we have that. I wanted to let you and the community know we did have our first Historic Preservation Commission meeting last evening. So we have officially kicked off, and great commission group of 9. And so we invited the state historian, one of the state historians, Pete Larange, to join us via phone. And so he kind of talked us through what is a Historic Preservation Commission and what is a certified local government. So it was a great discussion, and we're kind of looking at what are our next steps as a commission. There's probably going to be some interface with the Planning Commission at some point. One of the things we're looking at doing is a citywide preservation plan. And if we can get a grant for that, then that document, when it's completed, could be rolled into our comprehensive plan. And then lastly, we added this agenda item right below the staff comments, the Envision CDA committee updates. And before we go into that, I wanted to have Sean give some updates to you and the community on our Envision Coeur d'Alene project, which is our comprehensive plan in collaboration with CDA 2030 and the vision validation. So I thought it'd be helpful if he gave a little overview. And then the intent of this agenda item for this meeting and future meetings is just for all of you to kind of report to each other and to the community on how you're being engaged through the focus groups, the 6 focus groups, and the Community Advisory Committee. And then, of course, there will be opportunities for you as a commission to be part of reviewing the overall plan once that's drafted.
Okay. A question, not question, but on the new commission, is that going to be a televised, and when are they meeting, and how is that going to work with our comp plan?
It is not televised. We are trying to lock in how often we're going to meet. We're going to meet at least quarterly, but there was some interest from the commission in meeting more frequently. So we are going to be figuring that out. And it looks like when we meet, how frequently will probably be on the 4th Thursday. So depending on if that's going to be quarterly or monthly or somewhere in between that. But that's probably the day. We're meeting at City Hall in conference room 6 upstairs, and the meeting time will either be at 4 or 4:30. So we'll be doing agendas, and public is welcome to attend those. There'll be opportunity for public comment.
And then I know you're on that commission as well, or involved in that.
Staff
and then,
liaison.
Yeah, and so that would kind of their input at some point in time would get over to us for comp plan issues as far as how that might be put into the comp plan, unless Sean wants to address that.
We could certainly figure out how to get some input to them and vice versa. If we actually go forward and get the grant for a citywide preservation plan, we would hire a historic planner that would actually help the city staff and commissioners to create that plan, kind of looking at citywide resources. And that document, when it's done, could be rolled into the comprehensive plan, like we have other master plans that are kind of addressed and incorporated. But I think in terms of acknowledging historic preservation, that might be something we could ask them to provide some language for the Envision Coeur d'Alene document.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Hillary. Make sure can everybody hear me? All right. So I wanted to take this moment and talk a little bit about Envision Coeur d'Alene and what it is. And this is largely for the people that are home. I think everybody that's sitting up there already knows what it is. But it's an update and an amalgamation is kind of the word that we used when we put out the RFP. But between the Coeur d'Alene 2030 plans that they have and the city's comprehensive plan, we took a look at our documents, and we saw that there was an opportunity to work together to create a master document that would better enhance what both groups were trying to do. So I know 3 of you sitting up there worked pretty extensively on the plan that we have right now, which is the 2007 comprehensive plan. It was getting a little bit long in the tooth, and it was missing a big piece, which was the implementation portion of it. And through Coeur d'Alene 2030 and our plans being spliced together, we hope to fill that gap. It's important to note that the city has influence inside of our city limits as well as our ACI, but Coeur d'Alene 2030 will pick up the ball for more of the regional things, such as transportation elements that go beyond our border, which is, we feel that it's a good partnership moving forward to do that for our community as well as the greater area.
take a quick moment here to talk about the past, the present, and the future. And so lots of things have happened, and as an update, we have been working pretty extensively trying to put together the background information of where we are right now, kind of our existing conditions reports, and those include our economy, transportation, as well as the review of the existing plans, the comp plan and the vision and implementation plans. Through some meetings that we've had, we've gathered a bunch of information. The first was the community partner meetings, which included groups such as high tech, education, and business leaders, et cetera, that created a bunch of information that MIG and our sub-consultants have been using to create those existing conditions reports. Following that, we had a community advisory committee meeting, the first meeting. That went very well, and we also had an economic development meetings with much of the same groups like high tech, EDU, et cetera. Following that, we had a public kickoff, which was very successful. We had approximately 80 people that showed up. It was at the Innovation Den on September 26th, and a big portion of that meeting was playing the Making Better Places game. I think all of you have played that. It's a lot of fun and also educational at the same time. Let's see, and since then we've had pop-up game nights with that game, as well as we've gone out to NIC in the high school to play the game. We had a total of 22 games that have been played thus far. MIG recently had some meetings where they took all of that information and combined and layered all of the 22 games that have been played. I think a number of you saw those, and it's helping to identify where the public thinks that growth should happen based upon all of that input. And so kind of on the present day, on December 4th and 5th, we had the CAC, which is the Community Advisory Committee #2 meeting, and the Focus Group #1 meetings. Those spanned 2 days and were pretty extensive. We discussed the vision statement, and we are continuing to refine that. I think everybody weighed in on that, and we are still taking some comments that are trickling in through email. We also started to look at goal statements, and those are the higher level 30,000-foot view of what the goals of the city are, and with the understanding that later we'll start to drill down to look at the policies as well as the action items that would go along with those goals. So in the future, so what we have coming up is in January or February, MIG will be back for the next round of meetings with the CAC and the focus groups. Also, Bridge Economics will be in town, and they will provide an update to the information that they have found concerning our economic base. And let's see here. Also, at the same time, staff will be looking for public engagement opportunities to go out and attend events and meetings and things like that to generate more public input. That will include our website, quadrant meetings, and then those pop-up events. And so with that, I would like to turn it over for a minute to Planning Commission and see if anybody wanted to speak for a moment about the experience that they had during those meetings.
I'll go ahead and say something real quick. I'm on the Identity and Community Committee, and without getting into any of the details, because a lot was discussed, I think probably the neatest moment happened toward the end of the meeting when one of the, and there's a large cross-section of the community, political figures, business leaders, concerned citizens, and everybody in between. And one person in particular said, you know, I see why we're here. We're actually going to try to help you guys, when I say you guys, the planning commissioners that were present and some of the city council folks, we're going to help you design the comp plan, in essence. And I thought that was a really nice takeaway for that person, and I'm sure as a group they understood why we're all there, and we have our own areas of concentration and focus, but nonetheless, overall, it's definitely going to help us design a much better comp plan because of their input. So,
unfortunately, I had to miss my focus group due to a work commitment. So I'm on the education, but hope to be at the next one in January, February.
I do have the audio for that, and I will email it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, John.
So, thank you, Sean. You're doing a great job on this effort, and appreciate everything that you're putting into making this go. And I know what it took to make the last comp plan happen. It's a phenomenal amount of work, and this thing is incredible. So I sit on this growth and development focus group, and we had a meeting. What I thought is really great, and Commissioner Ward kind of touched on it in his group, is I was really impressed with the representation, the cross-section of folks on there. And one of the things that we've said up here, I think, and amongst us a lot, is that we really need to get the school district, kind of rolled into this in maybe a stronger fashion. And I was really encouraged to, our school district rep that's on that focus group is, I think, going to be a good voice there. And so we got to start, but we only put a little dent in this thing, and there's a lot more work to be done. The other thing I took away is, I hope you're collecting names there, because I think there's some really good future planning and zoning commissioner candidates among these groups. So there's going to be some good folks to fill these seats up here one day.
Thank you, John. Peter?
I was going to save my comments to the end of the meeting, but this came up. I think this is great. I share both Michael and John's comment. But we as a Planning and Zoning Commission, we always meet in public. We had a little tour of the lake the other day, there could be three of us that would go, because you couldn't have a quorum, and that's fine. That's the way it should be. So our meetings are advertised, and everybody knows what the agenda is, et cetera. And that's very good and very important. We went through the process last time, I think it was the first time, we had a series of meetings, planning and zoning did, and people came in some fashion, we reached out. This one is much broader and much better. I'd be hard pressed to ever say that we have too much public information or too much public comment, because the more public comment we have, the better. Now, I'm not so sure how well I'm on the environmental and recreation group. And I know what my opinions are, and I'll express them. But I don't know if I share my opinions, my views are shared with the commissioners. And so I'll speak for myself, but I don't know how I can speak for the commission. I'm concerned about that a little bit. So as I read this, we're going to put together the plan, and it's going to go to the city. What is the Planning and Zoning's Commission's responsibility in this process? What will we be doing?
Sure, and a part of the process, if you look at the timeline that goes with this project, there's going to be a meeting with council as well as Planning Commission prior to bringing it forward for ratification by either group, to take a look at that with our consultant and provide your feedback at that time. They will go back to the drawing board, quote unquote, and take those suggestions and update the plan prior to bringing it forward formally, where it will come to Planning Commission first. You guys can decide whether you like it or not, and then make that suggestion to council, and then council makes the ultimate call.
Well, that's what. So we are going to meet with the council, a joint meeting to go over the proposals.
Yes, that's the way it is written
And
right
will
now.
the proposals be pretty firmed up?
At that time, it will probably be about 75 to 80% would be my guess.
And I know I have several areas of interest, and I don't know if they're going to come up. Do I have to wait till that time to see if they come up? How do I get my 2 bits worth in it? Oh, I should myself. All of us have, I think, some interest based on our years of sitting up here and the public testimony we get and everything. I think a lot of us say, well, what are we going to do about the 10 inches? Should we do this? Should we do that? Now, that's a nit, but nevertheless, it was an issue. And there's some other things that come up. How do we introduce that?
Okay.
Is there a way that we as a group can get together someplace and have some discussions on that?
Sure, and some of that, like the 10-inch portion, that's more of an ordinance rather than the comprehensive plan, which is policy. So we got to make sure that we keep those items separate. So if there's a change that needs to happen at an ordinance level, then that's something a little bit different. But I'm only an email away. Whenever you feel like you need to provide some comment, send me an email.
I do not want to provide them direct individually. I want to provide them as a commission. Because we've got to have some type of cohesion in this, I think, as a commissioner. And I'm talking not about the ordinance, I'm talking about there might be some tonight. There'll be a split vote maybe. And one person will say, well, there should be this way. Somebody else will, well, it should be that way. Well, maybe these are things that we can develop in the comp plan to get some better resolution to. But thank you very much.
I am on the Health and Safety Committee, and Panhandle Health is there, the hospital is there, schools, mental health is represented. We didn't have fire and ambulance service, but they're there in spirit. And then the bike ped was there as a sort of round it all out. I think that at the end of the day, what we were looking for is, as a general kind of guide, what for us is equity for the underserved. Whether it was equity for wheelchair accessibility, audio accessibility, elderly care, safe children, way to get to school safely on a bike, whether it was adding curb cuts where we have none, parks in areas that are totally underserved, which I notice go a great deal. I see the parks, but I see the parks where they are not. So, and also being very aware of not building into our forests like California has, and lighting our lives on fire. So we're going to be kind of global on that, but we're really looking at equity for the underserved, the underrepresented. So.
Okay, great. I sit on the advisory committee, which has probably 15 people or so, or I don't know how many they have.
We're looking at about 22 right now.
All right, okay. And it's a combination of people throughout the city and some of the people from these other focus groups as well. And what we are doing with all the board games that were done with the public input, we had overlays of that particular map of the city, and each one of those overlays, which were kind of related to the game, which I'm not going to get into details, they were clear plastic overlays, and each one of those clear plastic overlays were kind of part of the, let's say, the game board. And Hillary, you can jump in because I know you were there. And so each one of those overlays had little dots on there related to single-family homes, where restaurants should be. So our focus is basically, and I found this very interesting, wasn't so much to do goals and policies, which is the rest of the focus groups, which I call it more of the verbiage of our comp plan. Our charge is kind of, all right, what is the connectivity? What is the, maybe other districts, how the city actually is going to function as a city to connect everything. And that's kind of what I've gotten out of what our meetings were about. And then I asked the representative from MIG, as Peter kind of mentioned, how does this all get into our comp plan? And he just said, yeah, we have these meetings, we take all this together, and then we present it to us, the city council, the staff, and we see how it actually is going to work. And then we maybe make some changes. So it's a process. And in the beginning, when all this started, I was like, all right, I'll go along with this to see how it's going to be. And it kind of made sense to me at this last meeting, because you can see with all the input, with all the people from the public that put all those dots on those charts, who participated in all the game boards places that we did, and with all these focus group people with their input, it's all kind of coming together. It's going to take some time, and I know it's tough for the general public and people who aren't at these meetings to really fully grasp how this is all going to work, because it's a very complicated, very detailed, long process to do this. But it's where I see it's working, so it's very interesting to see how this all came about from the beginning. Anybody else?
Thank you for everyone's input. Last little plug, if you haven't been to the website, visit envisioncda.org, and there's a bunch of information there as well as our contact info.
Right. Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. Okay, at this time, we're going to go into our public hearings. As I said, there's a sign-up sheet for each individual public hearing that we have. And the first one is SP-4-02, proposed minimum care facility special use permit in an R8 zoning district. And Tammy's going to give us a little presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. So this evening, we do have a request for a modification of a minimal care facility special use permit for an existing care facility that has 4 residential buildings, and they would like to request 2 additional residential buildings and increase the number of beds from 56 to 88. The applicant is Pacifica L44 LLC, and the architect is Todd Butler, and both are here this evening if you have any questions after my presentation. Property is located on the southwest corner of Dalton and 4th Street, and the legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on November 20th, 2019. So before I get into my presentation, I'll give you a little background information. On April 9th of 2002, the Planning Commission approved a request for the minimal care facility special use permit in the R8 zoning district, which would allow a living facility consisting of 4 dwellings with 14 residents each, and a total of 56 residents and 1 staff residence. On August 29th, 2003, the city received a request for an amendment to change the setbacks, which was approved by the Planning Commission at that time. The above request had 2 original conditions attached to the approval. One was the applicant must adhere to the site plan submitted with the special use permit, and the other was the maximum number of residents shall be set at 56. And due to the above conditions, that required the applicant to come forward for a modification of the special use permit for the change. So this is the location map. This is Dalton Avenue here, and so the property lies on the south side of Dalton and east side of 4th Street. This is the aerial photo showing the 4 existing buildings, which have 14 resident beds per building, and then an apartment here above the accessory building. So this evening, I'll cover all 3 findings for you. So the first finding is B8A, finding B8B, and finding B8C, which I'll cover. Finding B8A, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. And this is the area of the subject property, and it falls within the Northeast Prairie transition area noted in the green, and it is stable established. So Northeast Prairie tomorrow states in the comprehensive plan, typically a stable established housing area with a mix of zoning districts. The majority of the area has been developed, and special care should be given to the areas that remain, such as the Nettleton Gulch area, protecting the beauty and value of the hillsides and the wetlands. I've also included 3 of the comprehensive plan objectives, and there are additional ones on page 5 of your staff report. So objective 1.12 is community design. Objective 1.14 is efficiency, and objective 3.01 is managed growth. Finding B8B, that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on the adjacent properties. This is site photo number 1, and this is a view along Dalton Avenue looking south toward the subject property, and you'll see the 4 buildings located here, and the access is coming off of Dalton Avenue. In this photo, you can see the residential structures, and the proposed 2 additional buildings do have similar architectural style. And this site photo is a view along 4th Street looking west at the subject property, and this is the area where they are proposing to add the 2 additional structures. And this is a view along 4th Street looking toward the subject, This is looking south along Dalton Avenue, again at the area where they propose to have the buildings. And this is along 4th Street, looking east at the side elevation of the existing residential home, and they added a buffer at the original time of construction of a fence and some vegetation. This is a view from the subject property looking northwest at the neighboring property. And this is a view from the subject property looking west again along Dalton Avenue. And the view from the intersection of Dalton and 4th Street looking at the high school. This is the applicant site plan, and as I mentioned, here are the existing 4 buildings. Each have 14 resident beds. The applicant is asking for additional 2 buildings. Each of those buildings would have 16 beds with a total of 32 beds. And you'll see on the site plan, they have reconfigured the parking, and I'll touch on the parking a little. It's 1 space per 6 beds. A total of 15 parking stalls would be required for the additional 2 buildings, or for the overall project, excuse me, and they have provided a total of 27 parking stalls. And this is the proposed building elevation, and as you can see, it looks very similar to the existing buildings on the site. And I've included the main level floor plan, and they've got the common dining area, which is required for minimal care. This area for the subject property is zoned R8, and this is R12, and single family, this is the R3 zone. And there were only a couple special use permits within the vicinity, which is the existing minimal care facility. There is a church just to the south of that, and that was done in '87, and then the high school done in 1993. As far as land use, this is the subject property, and the blue indicates civic uses for the high school and the religious assembly, and then single families in the yellow. Finding B8C, the location, design, and the size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. Your staff report includes all of the staff comments, but in general, the city staff from engineering, streets, water, fire, planning, wastewater departments have reviewed the application requests in regards to public utilities and public facilities. Each department has indicated that there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request. And there is no objection to the special use permit request as proposed. And staff has recommended, it says 3 conditions here, but there was 1 amended condition that we've received later this morning, and I'll cover that in the condition. And I also made the owner aware of it. So as far as the conditions that are existing on this special use permit, it's the 2 that I had read from page 1, adhering to the site plan, and maximum number of residents shall be 56. So the commission would need to make a motion to remove those conditions. And then the recommended conditions are any additional main extensions and/or fire hydrants and services will be at the responsibility of the developer, and any additional services will have a cap fee due at the building permit stage. And the connection point for the project would be in 4th Street only. And then the additional condition that we got from the water department this morning was there is an existing 6-inch fire hydrant main that will have to be relocated for any new structures on the northwest side. And the public utility easement will also need to be realigned with a new main location. All will be at the developer's expense. And then as far as fire, no parking, fire lane signs will be installed along the north curb line for the fire department. And the minimal care facility special use permit requires that a set number be added to this request. And so the maximum number of residents shall be set at a maximum of 88 beds. So the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice.
Thank you. Questions of Tammy? Oh. Okay, thanks, Tammy. Appreciate it. Okay, I guess Todd Butler, the applicant. Come on up, Todd. Todd, if I just have your name and I'll swear you in.
Todd Butler.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go right ahead, Todd.
Well, I don't think I have really a whole lot more to add to, Tammy did a good job of outlining the project. I just think that this is a really good fit because the infrastructure is in place. It's an existing, just an extension of the existing use. The property, there's plenty of available land to handle these. And, you know, some of the things, we've got trees that are already mature. We have a lot of things that are really positive. It does work with the comprehensive plan by eliminating the urban sprawl. It's something that we can do as an infill project, and I just think it's a really good fit. If you've got any questions for me, I'd try to answer what I can.
Go ahead, John.
Mr. Butler, I just was curious when I looked at my packet and whatnot, if you know the history of this. You know, it looks to me, you know, as an architect, you could answer this, you know, maybe you have the history, maybe you did the original project?
I didn't.
But, you know, it looks like it was laid out with expansion in mind. You know, why would you set that property over there like that rather than space those around a little bit differently and blend that land between the buildings or something? I mean, was it envisioned to have expansion? And
You know, it's interesting because I knew the owners who developed this, and then I did the Renaissance assisted living for these the original people. And I do believe there was some of that thought at that time is, you know, how to expand it. If I had been a part of that, I would have said, well, just if you're doing a special use permit, go for as much as you want at the forefront, and you know, don't develop it all. But anyway, that's why we're here today.
Thanks.
I remember I was on the commission at the time when we approved the first plan. And this is one of the first assisted living places in Coeur d'Alene way back there. It might have been the second one. The first one was on Sherman. But yeah, I remember when this came forward, and then I think it came back because the resident unit in the back had to be added or something like that. So, but I remember that particular thing. At least one of the things I remember the years that I've been on here, if nothing else. But if no other questions for Todd,
I have a
Oh,
brief
sorry.
one, just very simple. I become more aware of fencing because of something that came before us a couple of meetings ago. I noticed that you have the fencing here is very open. Do you plan on keeping it that way?
I would anticipate when we get in more detailed design, usually with these kind of facilities, we create a secure area for residents where they can come and go. And, you know, it's usually not open to wander around the whole property. So there will be some fencing, although I know that will be, especially on a corner like that faces two streets, we'll probably have some limitations to height and those kind of things. So it's just kind of a design issue that we'll have to work in.
Well, I just think that the open fencing gives a completely different feel to a property. And maybe this comes up to my comments earlier on our comprehensive plan. Maybe we as a group want to talk about fencing in some fashion, be it open, like I think there's a requirement down in the Sanders Beach area, versus what we had through River's Edge, where they put a solid 5-foot wall or 6-foot wall through there. And I think that fencing is a necessary item, and is appropriate. But I think there's ways we can do it to make it more appealing to the eye and more open to vistas and views and so whatnot. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make that pitch to this group.
okay, thanks. All right, Todd.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great. Scott Peterson, and you do wish to comment, Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I think I'll just.
Well, you don't wish to make a comment? Okay, thank you. Abby Hawkins, you do wish to make a comment?
No, I'm
No?
representing the owners.
Okay.
If you guys want, I'm here to answer questions.
William Barber, and did not wish to make any comments. Okay, Todd, you have a chance to come up and talk about yourself again if you want, but otherwise, we're good. Okay. At this time, I am going to close the public testimony on this particular item and bring it to the commissions for discussion and a motion.
I'll propose a motion.
Go right ahead.
All right. This is a motion for findings and order on special use permit 4-02M. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on December 10th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item SP-4-02M, which is a modification of a minimal care special use permit to allow the number of resident beds to increase from 55 to a maximum of 88 beds with the addition of 2 residential buildings, the applicant being Pacifica L44 LLC, and the location at 840 East Dalton. I would recommend, as part of our decision criteria, that we adopt items B1 through B7. Moving on to the next set of findings, item B, or findings B8A, that this proposal is in conformance with a comprehensive plan. I know Todd mentioned it, of course, and I completely agree with that comment that it is discouraging, more of an infill, discouraging sprawl approach, so it meets the objective of 1.12 community design. Objective 1.14, efficiency, promoting the efficient use of existing infrastructure. And objective 3.05, neighborhoods, trying to preserve and protect existing neighborhoods from incompatible land uses and developments. And under the city services, objective 4.01, making decisions based on the needs and the desires of the citizenry. And I think where we're headed into the future, this is a project that is well deserved for that purpose. Finding B8B, the design and planning of this site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing use of adjacent properties. I mean, the property is set aside for something to happen in that north and west corner, and so it definitely would fit within that property boundary. Finding B8C, that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services based on all the staff reports that we heard about earlier. Therefore, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that Pacific L44 LLC for a special use permit, as described in the application, should be approved with the totaling four conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, the 4 conditions, including that new one from water,
Water
and then
number 2.
removing the 2 existing conditions from the previous approval.
Oh,
So
that's
those
right.
are the two
To
that-
remove
yep.
the 56 as a condition.
And that would be tied to the site plan. That's the other one that exists that
Okay.
needs to be removed.
So those are the special conditions that are placed on this motion. Therefore, that's my motion.
Okay, I have a first, looking for a second.
I'd second that, and then I'd add a comment that,
All right, I'll have a second, and we'll come in for discussion
Oh,
now.
sure.
Okay, go right ahead, continue, John.
just there's a lot of baby boomers, we know that, and we are aging, and there's something coming called the silver tsunami. And we're going to need more senior care housing, that's for sure. So this is a good thing.
Right, you're talking about yourself, I'm sure.
I'm in that boat, yes.
Yeah, we are.
All right, so I have a first and second. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
Utrip,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, SP-4-2 passes. Next on our agenda. We have 2 items. It's a PUD and a proposed 5-lot preliminary plat known as Belle Reve by the river. The applicant is Atlas Building Group, and Mike's going to give us a presentation. Good evening.
Items is Atlas Builder Group LLC, and they're requesting approval of a modification of a plan unit development and a 5-lot preliminary plat known as Belle Reve by the river. Property is located at 1809 West Belle Reve Lane. Legal notice was published in the Coeur Press on November 23rd, 2019, and all other required notifications have been made. The 2 decision points, again, before you tonight, is the amendment, the modification of the plan unit development and the 5-lot preliminary plat. This is historical information of the Belle Reve area. starting in 1999 with the annexation, and then soon after that, a PUD was applied for and approved, and then modifications were made throughout that, along with some interpretations. And then in 2016, we had a modification of open space from 18% to 10%, and that was approved. The modification request for this PUD is a front setback for the porch 10 feet as measured from the property line, the house setback 18 rather than 20 as measured from the property line, side yard setback 5 and 5 rather than 5 and 10 for lots without alley access, and minimum lot area of 5,250 square feet rather than 5,500 square feet, and minimum lot width and frontage of 32 feet rather than 50. Here's the location map indicating where this the subject property is. It's highlighted here in red. This is Northwest Boulevard. This is BB Lane, Billy B Boulevard, and this is West Belle Reve Lane. Here's a close-up aerial photograph of the property, highlighted in red. This is Centennial Trail here, and West Belle Reve Lane here, and the surrounding property, single-family and cottage homes here, and single-family down by the river, multifamily located here. Here's a bird's eye view looking south. See the property is currently vacant, and West Belle Reve Lane is located here, and Centennial Trail here. Here's the PUD site plan that was submitted. As you see, the applicant is going to build a private alley access to the driveway, access to the rear, so the lots can be accessed off the rear. And here is the setback diagram that was submitted with the application, showing the 5-foot setbacks from the property line, 10 foot from the front, 18 to the building, and then there's that 25-foot set, or the 24-foot easement in the back with a 25-foot building setback. The applicant has submitted some proposed building elevations that he's proposing for this project. Here's another slide of that. And another slide. There are 7 findings that must be met in order for plan unit development to be approved. Finding B8A through B8G. And we'll go over each one of those, starting with B8A. That this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan indicates this area in the Spokane River District area. It's highlighted, it's also in the stable established area, and stable established areas are areas where neighborhoods are primarily established and generally need to be maintained. The comprehensive plan indicates that the Spokane River District area is envisioned to have the scale of development will be urban in nature, promoting multimodal connection to downtown. The overall density may approach 10 to 16 dwelling units per acre, but pockets of denser housing are appropriate and encouraged. This slide represents 3 comprehensive plan objectives as it relates to this PUD. The full list is on page 7 and 8 of your staff report. Objective 1.12, support the enhancement of existing urban areas and discourage sprawl. Objective 3.05, protect and preserve existing neighborhoods from incompatible land uses and developments. And objective 3.01, managed growth. The next finding is finding B8B. The design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. Here's some site photos of the subject site. This is at the northwest corner looking southeast. This is on the northwest central part of the property looking southeast. And this is on the northwest part of the property looking southeast. And this is looking northeast through the property. This is looking north, and this is looking west. Here's the zoning map of the subject property. See the C17 PUD surrounds this property. We had a public hearing on this last month on the C17 for the Union, which was approved. Here's the land use map indicating the single-family dwellings located in this area and the multifamily located here with the mixed-use development. Finding B8C, that the proposal is or is not compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. The subject property is relatively flat with Belle Reve Lane to the south. The natural features of this site are consistent with the natural features of the surrounding property. The proposed development is consistent with the rest of the Belle Reve development. The next finding is finding B8D. The location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing public facilities and services. City staff from engineering, streets, water, and fire, wastewater departments have reviewed the application request in regards to public utilities and public facilities. Each department has indicated there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request. Full comments of the staff comments are on page 16 and 17 of your staff report. The next finding is finding B8E. The proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space area as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of the gross land area free of buildings, streets, driveways, or parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreational purposes. The overall PUD development of the approved open space areas that meet the 10% of open space requirement. Open space areas for the overall PUD development are not proposed to be modified or reduced. The next finding is finding B8F. Off-street parking does or does not provide adequate parking sufficient for users of the development. There are no requests made to the change of the city's off-street parking requirements through the PUD process. Single-family homes will be required to provide 2 off-street parking spaces per unit, which is consistent with the code requirements for single-family residential. And finally, the last finding for PUDs is finding B8G, that the proposal does or does not provide an adequate accepted method for the perpetual maintenance of all common property. The subject property is part of the existing Belle Reve HOA and will be tied to all the existing HOA requirements for the perpetual maintenance of all common property. Now we'll go into the subdivision findings. There are 4 findings that must be met in order to approve a subdivision. Findings B7A through B7D. First finding is B7A, that all of the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested by the city engineer. The city engineer has indicated that the preliminary plat submitted contains all of the general preliminary plat elements required by the municipal code. Deviations from the required subdivision standards have been requested through the plan unit development process, as noted in the PUD portion of the staff report. The applicant has submitted a preliminary plat that has been reviewed. The next finding is finding B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-ways, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are or are not adequate. City staff has indicated there are adequate public services and facilities available and are adequate to serve the proposed subdivision. See full comments once again on page 16 and 17 of the staff report. The next finding is finding B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all of the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards requirements. Per the engineering review, for the purposes of the preliminary plat, both subdivision design standards and improvement standards have been vetted for compliance. And finally, the last finding, B7D, the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. The existing zoning is C17 PUD, which allows for commercial uses as well as a mix of housing types at a density of not greater than 17 units per acre. 5 single lots that are proposed equates to a density of 7.5 units per acre. The proposed density is less than the allowed per the approved PUD. There are 3 recommended conditions, 1 from planning, 2 from water. The Planning Commission will need to consider these requests and make separate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Any questions of Mike? Oh, Peter?
A couple. The deviations that you listed here, how do those compare to the deviations that we addressed in a couple weeks ago called, I think it was the Union?
Yeah, they're very similar, except the Union had a greater setback on the rear. They were only be like 10 or 14 feet off the rear. This is going to be 25 feet.
But they're very similar, would you say?
Somewhat similar. Yeah, they're similar. The front setbacks are, yeah.
Because we received some criticism that what was done in the depot was, or the Union was excessive, more so than adjacent properties. And I don't know if that was right or not, but that was the criticism they had.
Yeah.
Secondly, private roads. We also had some concerns issued at that on the Union, and before that about the private roads there and how things are getting it is causing some issues with them. Will this private road add to that?
The private road is existing, and there's the road right here at Belle Reve Lane, so they're not gonna build any other, it's a private access driveway alley back here.
So it's not really a private road, it's private access.
That's right.
Very
with an
good,
access
thank you.
easement. Yep.
Like, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna follow up on that question. Had the gate that was, looking back on the date back in 2018, looks like
Right.
January, I guess, perhaps, or April, I'm not sure. But anyway, had that gate been put in, then that whole conversation would have been, this would have been a private road, correct?
I'm not
At
for-
that time.
This road is still private here, but I'm not for sure where that gate was proposed to be
Yeah, that's-
located.
I was trying to
But
remember too.
they would have to get access probably through that gate.
But just to confirm, none of this changes public access.
Pardon me?
None of this changes public access because it's existing roads and then the
That's
alley
cor-
behind
that's
the
correct.
properties. Okay.
This is very similar to the other houses that are there, that were the original Belle Reve.
Yes.
And they have access, if I remember this, in the back with a separate unit in the back.
Yeah,
The
there's-
off-street parking, I
Very
believe,
similar.
is a paved or grass or something for whatever they have to have for a car back there. And the gate situation which was denied, it's a private/public kind of road where people can get down to the docks and stuff like that. I think it's more so that shouldn't be any parking on Belle Reve for the neighbor's sake, and that works, and sometimes it doesn't. But this is very similar to all the products that are there right now.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, nothing, no? Okay, well, the applicant come up and kind of, Tiffany, or? State your name, Tiffany, and I'll swear you in.
Tiffany Espy.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go right ahead.
I just want to say thank you to staff for putting together such a thorough presentation. We don't have a whole lot to add. I do want to emphasize this would be very similar to the development, Belle Reve 5th edition, just next door to the east. I guess the only big difference would be more attached garages for these specific 5 homes. But otherwise, it'd have the same exact access, landscape buffers, and even frontage to that road, deviating from the 50-foot. Most of those on the Belle Reve 5th edition have 32 feet. So that's what we're proposing, between 32 and 40 feet frontage on Belle Reve.
Okay.
I'm available for any questions.
Okay. Got off easy.
Well, thank you.
Okay. I have Kenny, I apologize, I can't read your last name, but you did not wish to testify.
No, unless you have any questions for me.
You do now?
No. unless
come
you
on
have
up.
any questions. I'm the owner of Atlas.
Oh,
Building.
no, you need to come up to the podium so I can,
How you doing?
and I apologize for not.
No,
reading.
I didn't have anything for you guys, but if you have any questions.
Yeah, okay, just state your name and I can swear you in.
Kenny DeBang,
All right, and do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, you have a couple of minutes to.
So the houses that we are proposing or doing are attached garages, which the first ones here that Monogram did are detached. We built 5 other ones just on the other side of that to the east. They're attached garages, so they're gonna be exactly the same as that, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
So we've already built 7 houses down there,
Okay.
so.
Any questions? No? All right.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thanks.
you. Caden Forsberg did not wish to comment. Deb Vernon does, yes, come on up, Deb. Just tell me your name and I'll swear you in.
Deb Vernon?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
I live, and I use this, yes. I live right here, so I'm 2 doors down from the proposed area, and I do support it because we have a lot of parking issues on Belle Reve, particularly with the overflow of the Lapete. So seeing this become a residential development instead of a commercial is going to help towards alleviating that gridlock parking that we have on the weekends. So I totally support this 100%. My neighbors do. So please go ahead and approve it, and I'll be very happy.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Appreciate it. I have no one else on the sign-up sheet. Tiffany, if you don't have anything else to add?
I don't.
Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on these two items and bring it to the commissioners for some discussion and then hopefully a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on December 10th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of a PUD 1-04M7, a request for a modification of the plan unit development known as Belle Reve. The applicant is Atlas Building Group LLC. Location is 1809 West Belle Reve Lane. We accept the B1 through B7 sort of boilerplate. We've notified everybody. B8, pursuant to Section 17.07-230, Planned Unit Development Review Criteria, planned unit development may be approved only if the proposal conforms to the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. B8A, the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan. It's based upon primarily the natural environment, community design. It's a contiguous complementary piece with low density, lower than we could have imagined, having previously approved a 38-unit condo. So this is a bonus. And that we're discouraging sprawl. It really sort of fills in the box there. And it's efficient, so I think it's a good solution here. B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with location, setting, and existing uses on the adjacent properties. As I said, it's a match to what's existing, and it doesn't throw any spanners in the works. It's surrounded by PUD C17s, so it's a compatible use. Let's see, B8C, the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site. It's flat, and it's adjoining properties. B8D, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. The city's staff and engineering has all weighed in and approved this as compatible again. B8E, the proposal does provide adequate private common open space areas determined by the commission, and it is all part and parcel of the 10% Belle Reve overall PUD. So it's analyzed as an entirety. B8F, off-street parking does provide parking sufficient for users of the development consistent to our code. And B8G, that the proposal does provide for an acceptable method of perpetual maintenance of all common property through the currently operating HOA Belle Reve. In conclusion, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Atlas Building Group LLC for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved. Special conditions are applied on the following from planning. The applicant's request for subdivision and PUD runs concurrently. Subdivision and PUD designs are reliant upon one another. Additionally, approval of the requested PUD is only valid once the final development plan has been approved by the Planning Department. Water, any additional main extension and/or fire hydrants and services will be the responsibility of the developer at their expense. And third, any additional service will have cap fees due at building permits.
Thank you. I have a first.
Second?
I have a second. Can I have a roll call, Shannon, please?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Mandel?
Yes.
Luttrell?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Okay. PUD-1-04M7 passes, and need to do the findings for the S-6-19.
Shall I roll?
Please.
Does anyone else want to do it?
Who volunteered?
Okay.
Keep going.
Just keep going.
You're on a roll.
I'll keep going, okay.
It's the same.
This matter having come before the Planning Commission on December 10th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item S6-19, a request for a 5-lot preliminary plat known as the Belle Reve by the River. The applicant is Atlas Building Group LLC. Location is 1809 West Belle Reve Lane. The B1 through B7 standard boilerplate approved. B7A, excuse me,
We're
still
we're
in
still
hearing.
having
So,
you might want to
Back
hang in.
motions.
thank you.
B7A, that all the general preliminary plat requirements have been met as determined by the city engineer, and the city input has all been met. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-ways, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are adequate. Again, the city input has verified that. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all the subdivision design standards contained in Chapter 16.15 and all the subdivision improvement standards contained in Chapter 16.40. Those are all compliant per engineering. B7D, the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. In fact, they're under at 7.5 units per acre. In conclusion, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Atlas Building Group for preliminary plat of approval as described in the application should be approved with the special conditions as follows. Planning, the applicant's request for subdivision and PUD run concurrently, same as the previous approval. That water, any additional main extensions or fire hydrants will be the responsibility of the developer at their expense. And 3, any additional service will have cap fees due at building permit.
I have first.
Second.
I have a second. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, S-6-19 passes. Thank you. Next public hearing is applicant in Vista Meadows. It's a proposed PUD for Vista Meadows and a proposed 20-lot plat known as Vista Meadows. Go ahead, Sean. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. Adjust this a little better so I'm not so loud. Okay, so as alluded to, there is 2 requests tonight. One is a subdivision, the other is a PUD. The location is a 9.925 acre parcel located between the West Timberlake Loop and Alp Street, south of Prairie Avenue and north of Coeur d'Alene Place PUD. This is the area map. Right here is the subject property. This may be familiar to most of the Planning Commission as we saw this request, although it was a different request when the annexation, subdivision, and PUD came forward, which also included what I have called inside of my staff report as the panhandle. This property that allowed the PUD to lapse, so it reverted back to its R8. It came forward as a subdivision, which was approved, which allowed for duplexes in the panhandle portion of it. In the meantime, the school district purchased the property next door, as well as a wastewater utility extension that came up through Moselle. That is not a finished road, but it does service the property. We had some discussion about leapfrog development back then, and it's important to note that the wastewater is there and a pump site would not need to be needed in the southeast corner as last time because they weren't able to make grade at that time. So it was kind of a stopgap measure to get the property to flow properly, but that has been taken care of. So as far as tonight, we have 2 comprehensive decision points, a 20-lot, 6-tract preliminary plat known as Vista Meadows First Edition, as well as an approval of a planned unit development or PUD. This is what I was just talking about concerning the panhandle and the way that the property has been developed over time. This is a continuation of what I was just talking about, where the applicant worked with the school district as well as Coeur d'Alene Place to get the utility to the site. It's important to note also that Hayden Lake Irrigation District provides the water in this area, and so it's not going to be provided by the city. So now we are switching specifically to the subdivision portion of this request. So as mentioned earlier, it's a 20-lot, 6-tract preliminary plat known as Vista Meadows First, and it's 9.925 acres. The first finding that needs to be made is that all of the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested by the city engineers. Chris Bosley attested to that, which the elements that are required by code, although there is a PUD, so it does alter that a little bit, and we'll discuss that when we get to the PUD elements. This is the preliminary plat, which are the lots and blocks and tracks inside of the proposal. This is where I'd like to take a note that there was a little bit of back and forth going throughout the month. There were some adjustments made, and the day before Thanksgiving, we received some information that staff unfortunately didn't make it into the report, but it's fairly minor, but I want, for transparency purposes, wanted to explain that. Right here, tract 7 was denoted in the original proposal as stormwater. The applicant has provided street side swales instead for stormwater, and thus tract 7 will become open space rather than what was envisioned to be for stormwater. So that's actually a plus. That open space ended up being 14.3% rather than 12.5%. It's mixing the PUD and the subdivision information a little bit, but I thought I'd mention it early, and so it was fresh in everyone's mind as we move through. It is a phased request, and this is part of the reason why staff wasn't able to get that into the report in time, because when it came forward, it was only a single phase, but this shows very nicely what to expect as far as the phasing goes for the subdivision. Inside of this red area that's highlighted in yellow is that first phase. It's important to note that the open space that is provided will provide more than 10% that's needed in that first phase, although the amenities such as the gazebo and the planting areas will come with the second phase. That is also in the conditions at the end of the report. So finding B7B is that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities are or are not adequate. Pages 4 through 8 of your staff report discusses all of the comments that was provided to me by all of the departments, and suffice it to say that they are adequate. Nobody raised any large concerns. Okay, so this is the improvements. This is one of the exhibits that didn't get updated, although the lots and rooftops are exactly the same. They just altered the lot and block so that it worked with the phasing. You can see here where the sidewalks are located, as well as the driveways. It's also important to note that this Mocha Loop, which is a smaller street section here, will be private and gated, and then this Moselle Drive, which will also service the school up to the north, is a public street. And this is that road section for each one of those. This is Moselle, and this is Mocha Loop. There's also a secondary emergency access that will need to be fixed once they hit that 31st unit. It's a requirement by the fire department. We'll talk about that at the end. There was 12 conditions that were made, and like Tammy's with DRT today, the fire department wanted to add that it needed to be paved, and he said that he had discussed it with the applicant. The applicant will be up here in a moment, and he can, or she can, agree or disagree with that, but the fire department's going to require it. And this is that emergency access right here. Okay, finding B7B is that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standard requirements. So engineering reviewed that, and they agreed with it. It's vetted for compliance, although there are deviations to the PUD that we'll discuss after the subdivision. Finding B7D is that the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. Once again, the PUD will overlay this and make a few small changes. One is that Block 1, Lots 3 and 4 will have less than 50 foot of frontage as required by the subdivision. They are slightly less, but not too much. And then the lot size requirement would drop a touch as well. So now we're moving on to the PUD, where we can discuss the subdivision deviations. So the chief benefits for the PUD are listed here. These are their requests. And density analysis, it's always important to take a look at a PUD and understand the nature of such. So they had just a hair under 10 acres to work with, which is about 432,000 square feet, which would allow 78.6 units, or rounded up to 79. The applicant is proposing 68 total units, so about 11 under what could have been, and that equates to 6.85 units per acre. So the deviations, they are requesting deviations to these bulleted items. The housing types in an R8 district, you are allowed to have duplexes, but it requires the same amount of land as 2 single families would. But they are also proposing triplexes, which wouldn't normally be allowed in an R8, but through a PUD they can make that request, and they are. Their setbacks are changing. They are asking for 5-foot side yard setbacks, 10 feet between buildings, and then they're asking for a reduction of the rear yard setback from 25 feet to 20 feet. So the lot frontage on a public street, the private street, Mocha Drive, that I was just pointing out to Planning Commission, will be private, thus no frontage on a public street there, so that's just a typical requirement when there's a private street. Minimum lot size is also reduced. We just talked about that. Block length and mid-block walkways. There is a subdivision standard that states when a block gets to 600 feet that you need a pedestrian connection to cut through there. There is, on the west side, there is already a development where there is no availability to connect to. There's no legal or physical access, and that that staff is happy to forego that. There would just be a path to someone's backyard or to a fence. So on the other side, maybe there might need to be a little bit of discussion. They are requesting that to be foregone. There is 5 acres that's in the county, and we're not sure it was de-annexed because of some issues with that house a number of years ago, but nobody knows what will ultimately end up over there. And then curbing. So they are requesting rolled curbing instead of the 6-inch standard curb. That's pretty typical with a PUD. It does a couple of things. It allows the developer to not have to come in and cut that 6-inch curb to provide the driveway later, so it's kind of an efficiency thing. It also allows vehicles to pull up and mount that curb and sometimes park on a sidewalk. In this case, we have detached sidewalks on the public street, so the car would end up in the swale. Most likely, we're not going to see vehicles doing that, which is good since there's a school close by. We don't want to see 40 cars of soccer moms parked over the top of the sidewalk. So the PUD findings. Finding B8A is that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. This can be found in the Ramsey Woodland District. Here's that map. Highlighted here in this area is the subject property. It does fall within 2 land use categories, stable, established, as well as transition. And back in 2007, this was almost all of this was field, and it's being built out pretty quickly, and so it fell into those 2 categories at the time. These are the descriptions of the Ramsey Woodland today and tomorrow. I won't read those verbatim into the record. I'm sure no one wants to hear that again. But it is important to note that the Ramsey Woodland neighborhoods will be in the future, and I underlined the ones that apply most directly to this request, which are pockets of higher density housing and multifamily units are appropriate in compatible areas. Parks are within a 5-minute walk. They are proposing a private park, and multifamily and single-family housing units are appropriate in the area. The goals and objectives, I listed them all out here, but I did not provide The definitions of each one of these, they can be found verbatim in on pages 14 and 15 in your staff report. Finding B8B is the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. You can see the general information that I had up here a little bit earlier. It's on page 2 of your staff report, as well as the Ramsey Woodland today and tomorrow descriptions that I didn't read into the record, as well as the following and the listing of B8A. The following items here are going to be a land use map and a zoning map. This will help define what the area is. It's currently vacant right here. This area is still defined as vacant as we haven't started to see construction here. The school is currently under construction, and that is a civic use, which is denoted in the blue, and then Coeur d'Alene Place to the south is still it's still listed as agricultural, although a piece of this Rochelle is under development, and that will need to be changed to single family, as all of the properties are that are directly west. In the zoning map, you can see it's kind of bleeding green out there. That's R8 and R8 PUD for the most part until you get to the Ramsey Road, and the properties that are abutting there are C17L and C17 PUD, R17. I think everybody's pretty familiar with Fescue Lane. We've all lived that one recently. Here's a bird's eye view of the subject property looking north. You can see that it is largely flat, and this is a little bit of an older picture, as now that wastewater line has been roughed in, as well as Moselle Drive, although it's not paved yet. So here is an additional picture. This is that emergency access that I had spoke to earlier concerning the fire department. This is looking into the subject property, which is here. This is where Moselle meets Coeur d'Alene Place, and this is looking into Coeur d'Alene Place south from the property. And then this is just north of the subject property, which was that panhandle. You can see where the new school is under construction here. And then this request tonight is just outside of this picture. I couldn't fit it into the picture because there's a fence there, and it was not photogenic. All right, so finding B8C is that the proposal is or is not compatible with natural features of the site and adjoining properties. Like I said, it's relatively flat. The utilities are there, and it's largely a neighborhood area with a developing school. So unit types and locations. This bank of single-family homes over here is kind of in this lighter pinkish red color, and then the remaining are duplexes and triplexes that are in a condo-style development. Here's the unit types, which this is a single family. Architecturally, this is generally what we would see being developed out there. And then this is a duplex as well as a triplex, so they all are of similar design. Finding B8D is that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing public facilities and services. We've just extensively talked about water and wastewater. I think we're good. If you want more information, look at pages 4 through 8. Finding B8E is the proposal does or does not provide adequate private common open space area as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of the gross land area, free of buildings, streets, driveways, or parking areas, and it shall be accessible to all users of the development for open space and rec purposes. And so the applicant, they wrote a pretty long paragraph here. I won't read it entirely into the record, but it is designed to be a senior community, and they are designing their open space to serve somebody that is of that age. And then this is what I had already discussed regarding moving from the 12.05% of open space up to 14.3 with tract 7 that is now open space. And that is this red highlighted area down here that was added. Here's the landscaping plan. You can see there's fairly extensive plantings that will go into those open space areas. And as mentioned earlier, the gazebo / pavilion and the planting areas will come in phase 2. Although in phase 1, this area will be provided. It will be grassed, and the sidewalks will be built in phase 1. So they didn't ask for any concessions to the parking, and here are the parking requirements as required by code. Finding B8G is that the proposal does or does not provide for acceptable method of perpetual maintenance of all common property. Vista Meadows LLC and Veritas will work with the city to ensure that the HOA takes care of that type of property. So there are 12, and then the +1 condition, which I had mentioned concerning the fire department. And they are all here. I won't read them into the record and bore everyone. I'm sure that the commission had the time to review those prior to this hearing tonight. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you. Planning Commission must consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. That concludes my staff report. If there's any questions?
We have some questions.
Thanks, John. Good report. Appreciate that. On page 6 of the staff report, city engineer makes a couple of comments. One sounds a little bit concerning. The first comment is that the applicant will have to receive approval from Lakes Highway District for access, and I'm not worried about that. I don't think it needs to be a condition, because if they don't get it, it doesn't happen. You know, I mean, that'll take care of itself. I think that's just a good heads up on the part of the city engineer to make that comment. But the second comment maybe is a little bit concerning. It says that single-family lots currently show the 20-foot parking area to extend into the sidewalk, potentially blocking pedestrian circulation. The required parking area should not include any portion of the sidewalk. Could you illustrate for us on the
I'm not sure exactly what that
what
is.
the nature of that comment might be?
Yeah, and I think I noticed one thing, and I'm sure it's not what was indicative. If I get back to here, so you can see, that is correct. I just noticed that. The driveway length is not 20 feet before the garage. They did not request that. That is a mistake. I did not catch that. On this one, it shows 20 feet from back of sidewalk to face of garage, but this one does not. I thought that was a swale, but this is the sidewalk, correct? I think that's the street side swale. I think we're getting wrapped around the axle here. I think what we're seeing here is the street side swale, and the sidewalk is at the back of curb. I'll let the applicant discuss that. So I think Chris interpreted that incorrectly.
Okay.
So I just did the same thing.
Well, I have a question on the road width, because Moselle will become a pretty highly trafficked area, especially getting into the school, I would think. And we got kids on bikes. Will we have enough road width to put a dedicated bike path for these kids to get safely to school?
A dedicated bike path was not discussed by the engineer, and also Monty McCulley is the trails coordinator and did not comment. So not sure if there is going to be a dedicated bike path there.
So they may
There
be on the
is
sidewalks.
Right.
And therefore, we don't want cars in sidewalks.
Right,
Sort of going
and-
around to the circle point.
If you remember back to when this request included the panhandle, there was a concession that was made that Pronghorn, that services the school, only had the sidewalk access to the school on the north-hand side, because we didn't want kids coming on either side of the street when the vehicles would be coming through there. So that's how that was handled.
Can you ride your bike on the sidewalk?
You're not supposed to.
I believe
But against cars, I'll
downtown you
take a
can't.
sidewalk any day.
Well,
I believe,
I think the only place it's restricted is downtown, but I'm not positive.
I believe you raised a very good issue, and maybe Monty missed this, or I don't know, it's,
I want my kids to get there safely, and in a neighborhood like this, you want them on their bikes or on their feet.
Right.
So avoid the cars as all possible. And Moselle's going to be a pretty busy street, I think, when it finally builds out. I think I can
It will
see that
connect
as
Coeur
being
d'Alene Place, and then it will,
a pretty quick street.
right,
Okay.
and it'll serve on to
Right.
Prairie, which is a very busy road.
Now,
It's outside of the city's
you had
jurisdiction.
one of the, and maybe it'll go to the next question, is this is all of these duplex and triplexes, whether they're behind the gates or not, that is envisioned as a seniors? Or is the main drag Moselle sort of family, single family, not dedicated to elder?
You'll have to
retirement?
ask the applicant that.
Okay.
The way that I
So
read
wasn't
it was
clear.
the condo area would be kind of dedicated to 55. I didn't speak very much to that in our staff report because there is no code that really speaks to that age group. And once you hit 65, you can get a pretty big reduction to parking, and that, if they were to ask for that, then that would have to be recorded as part of the deed. So I didn't get into the 55-year-old
Okay.
request.
Go ahead, Peter.
where else in the neighborhood are there triplexes?
And then, well, that's a good question.
Question.
There's going to be, let's pull up this map. So right here, this Fescue Lane is R17 right now, and that is going to be apartments. So that's probably the closest thing that is of a multifamily nature. And that is going to be a number of apartments.
Triplexes?
They're more like 8 or 9 or 10 in a row.
Townhouses and apartments, right? But yeah, I'm not sure how many
Yeah,
together.
they're all side by side.
And where
Configuration.
else do we have in excess of 600 feet between breaks in the street?
Well, that's, I could probably point out a few here. There's one here. I'm guessing this one is here, this one is here, this one is here. They're
number
fair,
of
I mean, that's the reason why that code was
Quibbling
changed with
plates.
our last subdivision ordinance, was to address what we call super blocks, where you couldn't get somebody through to a neighboring jurisdiction or a neighboring neighborhood or subdivision. It's
Does
designed
that
for
cut down
connectivity.
on the connectability of the neighbors, of kids riding bikes and whatnot?
And there will be a connection through the street. I mean, the street will go to the school. Now, the 5 acres that is currently in the county, this is what I was talking about right here. If you look up there, there's a very large single-family house here. Nobody knows for sure what this is going to be. There should be an opportunity for them to get to the school directly from the south, but that leads into what's designed as the looping area to drop off the kids in vehicles. So I'm trying to see if there's a way to funnel them around to where the anticipated access is.
So what does that mean? There's no access to the school now?
Oh, there's plenty of access. So what I was suggesting is, let me get here. That this area, this is that house that we're just looking at. And then there's all of these homes, these 13 homes along this edge. If this does develop in a similar fashion, how will these children end up getting to school? That was my suggestion. And so I didn't know if there was an opportunity to allow access to come through one of these areas so that future development here that may or may not ever happen, nobody has that crystal ball, but do you want to provide that availability in the future?
Why wouldn't we want to provide that availability?
That's why I'm posing the question.
Well, it is up to what the PUD does is it essentially, we go through a series of processes, meetings, community input and so forth, to determine zoning in various places. And the PUD permits us to overlay in a certain area and change that zoning within that area. And that gets to what I was talking about earlier. We as a group, I'd like to have us discuss PUDs and the wisdom and what they're trying to gain and so forth. Now, I would imagine that the PUD is a joint venture, that the property owner gets some benefits and the city gets some benefits. What are the benefits the city gets here?
That is a question more for the applicant than it is us. I have laid out in my staff report, if you could look on, because it talks, that exact language is in the staff report concerning a PUD. And so what the benefits for them are laid out, and what the
I'm more
benefits
concerned about the
for the
benefits.
city is really up to the applicant to say, here's what I'm providing the city. Staff doesn't want to make that argument.
Staff doesn't want to make the argument what the benefits are of the city that the applicant should
For their development, yes,
for their PUD.
right. The Planning Commission weighs what they're providing to determine whether or not that is a benefit to the community. And you're asking, I guess, my personal and professional opinion on that. I mean, there's now wastewater there. There will be a future street there. It's access to the school, and there's a detached sidewalk with a planting strip. You know, I can tell you what they're physically going to provide, but whether or not you deem that to be to the level of approval for this PUD is up to Planning Commission.
Well, I do like your planning department's professional opinion as to what benefits will be derived by the city.
You know, is a gated neighborhood a benefit or not? That's up to Planning Commission to decide.
So you can see no benefit to the city for this PUD,
I didn't say that in any way, shape, or form.
did you say? I
think on page 8, Peter, if you were to take a look at it, at the very, very bottom of page 8, it says the commission must decide if this request meets the intent of the PUD regulations, and in doing so may wish to consider that certain benefits accrue to the city. And it's listed on those 4 or 5 bullet points.
Very, very good, Michael. That's it. And I can read the benefits here. And that's what gets me going on the PUDs. The benefits is preservation of private open space. That's a benefit to the city. Ability to add conditions to approval. That's a benefit to the city. Ability to lock in development plans for future through the approved and final development plan. That's a benefit to the city. Ability to negotiate solutions that benefit all. That's a benefit to the city. You know, I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem it is. But I'm just, you know, I'm one of however many there are here every time. Then you talk about a private road, you talk about 600 feet, you're putting a big block, let's say, I mean, a physical block in this area. We'll just look at the map there, nice and open. You got a gated community on one side, you got 900 feet on another side. I mean, you just have a lot of things here, and it just doesn't appear to me. Well, I'll save my comments till.
Yeah, I think that's a point where we can come to discussion later, and let's get the applicant up here if you have no more questions for Sean. And Peter, you can address some of those concerns to the applicant, and we'll have discussion in a little while.
Do I just scroll it?
You can click or use space.
You guys see me? Barely.
Can we, a little bit louder, please, for
Okay.
the applicant to,
Stephanie Blaylock from Veritas Land Use Planner.
all right, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want to introduce the team since we're all here before I start the presentation. We have John Butler, which is the property owner, Merle Van Houten, which is professional engineer with Veritas, Rachel Harris, which is landscape architect with Veritas, and then Sandy Young, which is a president and land use planner with Veritas as well. I'm going to go through my presentation and then try to address some of the questions at the end of that, if that's okay. As Sean explained, we're seeking approval for the plan unit development and subdivision. Vista Meadows will be a senior living plan unit development. The subdivision will be constructed in 2 phases for a total of 20 lots, and that should be 6 tracts. That was my bad. The proposal fills a need within the community by providing a neighborhood for aging in place homes. These are homes that people can age in. As they get older, they have smaller yards, less maintenance. Adding a community for senior living in Coeur d'Alene is a perfect fit and necessity for the area. As the baby boomer generation ages, a need for senior housing grows. Vista Meadows PUD would provide that much-needed housing. The project was designed to be compatible with the surrounding subdivisions, but provide a distinction to future residents with the 55 and older community. There will be a total of 68 residential units, a mix of single-family, duplex, and triplexes that will eventually be condominiumized. The open space is at 14.3%. That's free of structures, parking areas, streets, and driveways. By clustering the homes and the lots required, acreage for the density units proposed will be absorbed in that open space, which provides a large usable area for residents. The density shown is only 6.8 acres per acre, which falls under the 8 units per acre in the R8 zone. Amenities that would be provided in the PUD is it's a 55 and older requirement for the residents, and that's for the entire PUD. So that's for the single-family lots as well as the duplex, triplex lots that'll be condominiumized. The project was designed with the senior community in mind. Mocha Loop will be gated, but the amenities will be provided to all of the PUD residents. Walking paths will be constructed to provide connectivity within the community. Benches will be provided at intervals to accommodate resting and relaxation in the outdoors. A large common area with a picnic structure and garden boxes will act as a shared venue for neighborhood events and get-togethers. A parking lot will be located near the picnic structure for the residents and their guests. There will also be a fenced dog park. This will allow the residents in the condo units an area to exercise their dogs. The subdivision will be constructed in 2 phases, and phase 1 will consist of a continuation of Moselle Drive, which is here, the 13 single-family residential homes, and the 10 triplex and duplex units. There will be a grassy ornamental planting area with a bench in this open space up here, track 3. And track 5 will have the perimeter path, which is along here, ornamental planting, and a grassy area installed as well. And there'll actually be 17% of the open space constructed in the first phase. Our requested deviations, it's a 5-foot side setback, which would allow for 5 feet on each side of the structure. A 5-foot rear setback, which brings the setback to 20 feet instead of 25, and a reduction of minimum lot size. Right now, the R8 zone is 5,500 square feet, and our smallest lot is 4,826 square feet, which is a reduction of 674. The block length from the north to the south will be 643 feet without a pedestrian connection, which is only 43 feet deviation. So we're from here to here is 643 feet. There's no connection over here. And then I wish I had a vicinity map that showed the road that's installed up here. So it's just past where Vista Meadows to the north has been developed. We're asking for a rolled curb. Both Moselle and Mocha will utilize rolled curb per the engineer street section on the drawings PUD 4. The frontage deviations for 2 lots from the required 50 feet length. So block 1, lot 3 will be 39 feet frontage, and block 1, lot 4 will be 47 feet of frontage on the public street. Reasons for those deviations is the lot size and setback deviations are necessary to keep the lots smaller and more manageable for the maintenance and the care of the senior residents. The lot depths were determined by the Moselle Drive aligning with Vista Meadows to the north and Coeur d'Alene Place to the south. So I'm going to go back. So these lot depths are what they are because of this alignment for Moselle Drive. The block length increase is justified by the strong pedestrian connection just to the north, which is in Vista Meadows, and the proposed connection to the south of the development. The school being constructed does not indicate a pedestrian connection along the length of that block. These both render an additional connection unnecessary. The requested deviations are minimal for the size of the proposed development. In conclusion, the request meets the Ramsey Woodland category district of the city's comprehensive plan by proposing senior housing in an established neighborhood area with passive and active parks. There will be connectivity from adjacent subdivisions, which allows pedestrians, students, residents, and citizens connecting to Prairie Avenue or the proposed school a safe pedestrian travelway. The Vista Meadows PUD will connect and expand the housing options available in this area. I want to address the question of what is the benefit to the city. Adding senior housing right now for the baby boomers is much needed. In talking with John Butler, who's a realtor, there's just not a whole lot of housing out there for seniors. So adding this development would just add that inventory to the city of Coeur d'Alene. It would provide a desirable neighborhood, and then open space in the parks that's being provided is an asset as well. Is there any questions that I can address? I am going to have Merle stand up and address the bicycle path question.
We've got,
for Moselle.
go ahead.
Moselle.
Yeah.
Why gates? What are you hoping to achieve by putting gates?
They just want to put up a private community for the seniors, and so in order to do that, we had to go through the PUD process and put in the parks and all the additional amenities as well. But he just wanted to provide a neighborhood that had gated, that was just for the seniors.
I'm going to jump on that same question then too. So if the parking, if I'm not mistaken, if you wouldn't mind putting the preliminary plat
This one?
back up there. In the
This
center, what appears to be an oval with some sort of structure in the middle, I think that's the gazebo and the garden area and all the grassy areas for common use and access and via sidewalk. But that gray area immediately to the left, kind of the largest, there you go. That's for parking, correct?
It is for parking, so it's for additional parking for guests. So
How can you get to it if there's a gate there?
Got to go through the gate every time.
they'll, the guests coming will be guests of the residents within it. So they'll somehow work out a system to allow them, give them the gate code, buzz them in. They'll be invitation guests.
But even if everyone lives along Moselle, is that the name of the street?
This one's Mocha.
Yes,
and this one's Moselle
But
here.
Moselle, since it's all available for everyone to use, if anybody that happens to have a guest and they're on that Moselle and they need to access the additional parking, they'd have to go through the gate.
They would have to go through the gate, and there'll be a gate code that all of the residents will have.
On the Moselle, are those seniors as well then, we're assuming?
Yes, yep. All 68 units will be 55 and older.
I tend to agree with you. Why put the parking so exclusively that it's not easy to use? And then you end up parking and they futz their way around this fence. And so one has to wonder where the fence is and where the start and stop of the gated part is. Wouldn't it have been easier to have the parking on Moselle, easy access, easy on and off, don't have to deal with, and by the way, memory as you get older, memory gets really foggy.
I'm sure it does.
You know, how many times we start something, and go, what was I doing?
And,
So,
the gate won't pose a problem for the residents. Everybody, and they'll have neighborhood meetings, the gate code shouldn't change. I mean, everybody will have access to all of the amenities. That includes the gate codes, the parking, the parks, all of it.
Even using your phone as you get older. I have a brother losing it. It's hard for him to use a phone, I'm standing at the gate and I can't get in. One thing that I'm not in the design review committee, but I do urge you that if you are going to focus on elder care, that you do make these buildings more than just a whole bunch of slant roof, same old thing, repetitive, because people do get confused as they get older. They need distinctive landscaping, they need numbers that are big, they need to have, an easy way to know that that's their house.
Right.
That they're not going, oh crumbs, is that red house or is that the red house? Or that is a big deal, memory care and memory and keeping them able to own this as their own home. And that's what I'm seeing. I see these repetitive slope roof things and they're all starting to look the same in town. And again, we're moving our craftsman, we're now into the slope roof solution. But I really urge you that you make sure that these houses have a distinct character to them for each individual.
Okay.
So that then when they drive up, they're not confused.
Right.
And we deal with that every day in the city, so.
John?
Question for you, and this is maybe going to put you on the spot a little bit, Sandy. If you remember going back to Garden Grove in this room, and we talked about deviations of rear setbacks, you might remember the dialogue with the backwards L. Do you remember the backwards L? And what that really had to do with was along one boundary, we conditioned it and said, no deviation on that side because it bordered Sunshine Meadows, and a bunch of people went to that podium, and they were very, very concerned. And so we said, it's fine to have the deviation, but not up against existing single-family houses. They were there first, if you will, and out of a respectful thing, that condition was added. In this case, as we sit here tonight, I don't see anybody in the audience likely to go to the podium tonight from the west boundary of this. The folks in Sunshine Meadows that are already there, what can you say that would make me less concerned that what we did for Garden Grove went to all of that effort and to protect them? Isn't this the same thing? And no one's here to say complain, but should we not have a condition on the west boundary that says that we're not going to deviate along that boundary for the same reason, for consistency? Could you address that?
I think I can. I want to Merle first quickly.
Let's see who wants to come up. Whoever that question is addressed to would come up to the podium and answer it. Stephanie, if you don't have the answer for that, that's fine. And if we have any questions of Stephanie at this time, I would address those questions to Stephanie. If not, Stephanie, can have, I guess, someone else.
I think
Go
you
ahead.
said that this development is going to be compatible with the area. Can you explain that?
Well, as Sean had a kind of a panoramic view of it, you have quite a few housing developments within the area. The deviations we're asking for, I believe, are fairly minimal, just a 5 foot on the side and then a 5 foot in the rear to provide the smaller lots. And we're keeping with the density at a 6.8 unit density rather than at the full 8 units. So it's a lower density, and everything around it's R8 or a higher density.
Thank you.
Any more for Stephanie? No? Okay. I'm going to go down the list, and I have Rachel Harris, who did not wish to comment. Sandy Young, you are going to change your mind and comment?
I am going to change my mind. Sandy Young.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, Sandy, go ahead.
As I heard you discussing this project and Stephanie presenting it, I started thinking about all of the similar type developments we have in the city that are very similar to this. Of course, Garden Grove, which is almost next door. And then I think of Meadow Ranch up next to Fred Meyer, which is very similar to this, as well as the Circuit on Celtice, which was a project we brought before you, and Riviera Walk in Riverstone. And I wanted to address, first of all, the parking. So this is one of the few we've actually designed with a separate parking area. So in those other developments, when guests come to visit, they're actually parking on the street, which is not unlike anywhere else in the city. And these streets have been designed for that, and city engineer has looked at that. And if you have any further questions on that parking, I think Merle will be able to address those for you. So I guess I want to, just emphasis that the parking is more than what we usually show, and that 2 parking spaces per lot are provided. And then, of course, we have the street for parking, the roll curb. And Merle will come forward and address the driveway length, so I'll leave that for him. And then Commissioner Ingalls, you asked about Garden Grove and that deviation. So we did have some deviations in there, and it was at the hearing when we just kind of jumped up and said, you know what, we'll provide that for those neighbors. There has been no opposition on this. This is no different, I think, than the Belle Reve that we just heard before it. So we had a 20-foot deviation, or a 5-foot deviation there for a 20-foot setback. It's not an unusual request, and certainly if we had neighborhood opposition, we'd be willing to address that. But I think now, honestly, in an effort for infill development, we're seeing an acceptance, more of an acceptance than I've seen in the last 20 years here in County of deviations from the norm. And I do want to impress that we are under the allowable density, even though we're asking for the lot sizes to be slightly smaller. Overall, that density is there. And of course, the open space provides that additional space, just like it did in Circuit and Saltese, just like Meadow Ranch with the garden areas. And so, if you have questions for me, I'll stand for those. Otherwise, I'd like Merle to come up and address the engineering.
I do have a question in terms of, benefits to the community and whatnot, and being in sync with the comp plan. We've talked a little bit about the baby boomers and the silver tsunami and whatnot, and it's coming, it's real. And these developments you mentioned, the Garden Grove, the Meadow Ranches, the Circuit on Saltus, and they're very popular, and a lot of the people moving in here are older. And I live in one of these. I live in this Park Rose, and it's one of these gated deals. But they give folks that are a little older a sense of security or something. That they are very popular. As a benefit of this one, maybe I was sitting here thinking to myself, and as Commissioner Luttrop was talking about, haven't seen a lot of triplexes and whatnot as a condo type platted product.
Mm-hmm.
But where I live, with this little Park Rose deal, they're getting kind of spendy in there. The new one that Greenstone's building, the Soul Deal, is getting pretty spendy. That $300,000+ These triplex units are probably going to be fairly affordable in comparison to a lot of the other owner opportunities out there. No.
I would say yes, but I would rather defer that to the applicant, who that's his expertise, much more so than mine.
Thank you.
Okay, and then again, the gate security, that's what we're hearing from people. People want to be somewhere where there's a gate code and a gate, just like Meadow Ranch, just like Circuit, and I'm gonna say just like Riviera Walk, unless they didn't put one up, but that was always the plan there as well. Okay, and I can come back up certainly if there's
Thanks,
anything.
Merle Van Horton, you want to come up? State your name and I'll swear you in.
Merle Van Houten.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right, well, thank you. I am the project engineer, and I also oversaw the design of the first phase that's just to the north of what we're discussing tonight. Originally, we had this designed as a PUD for all 15 acres. It was approved, and like Sean said earlier, it was lapsed. But what came out of that was, to give you a little history lesson, was the need to run the sewer up through through this phase to get to the first phase, to get to the school. We had to decide on an alignment to do so that wouldn't, that we could feel like comfortable with as we brought this phase forward. So what we did is we stuck with the alignment that was proposed back then when this was a full 15-acre development. And that sewer line as it stands today is under what we're proposing as Moselle Drive. In other words, Moselle Drive, as you see it today, is the same alignment as it was back then when it was originally approved. So what that left us was the lot depth that we're looking at. At that time, 2 years ago, it was duplexes. Now it's single family. And to what I'm getting to here is these 13 lots, 11 of them, from the 11 southernmost, I should say, have that 18-foot depth driveway that generated the city engineer's comment about not meeting the full 20 feet. That's the only place that this is occurring in this project. So that's kind of the history of how we got there. I personally feel 18 feet is acceptable, as it meets the criteria of most design vehicles. In fact, if you look at parking standards, compact stalls get down to less than 16 feet in depth. I can't vouch for everybody's parking ability, but I think that given 18 feet, most people can clear the sidewalk. And as far as the parking goes, it was placed on the inner loop, Mocha Loop there, because Mocha Loop does have a narrower street section. Per our discussion with the city, Mocha Loop will be posted as no parking on the street. So we felt that it was necessary to give those people extra parking. It already meets the city's requirement in that there is parking at the garage and in the driveway, so each unit will have 2 spots available to them at their place, but, we recognize that guests do want to come visit. Hopefully people do want to come visit their grandparents. So we wanted to give them a place to park in the area that's most convenient to them. That's where we saw it as being. So I'm happy to answer questions about those topics or anything else regarding roads, water, or sewer. And I also understand that the applicant would like to speak as well after me.
So the parking you were talking about was on the private street?
Yes, yeah,
So that you've got parking for the visitors in that, your parking lot. So we won't be facing the problem that we have down Belle Reve, that people are coming to us and saying that there's no parking because they can't accommodate the parking of the visitors and everything, and they wanted to gate the road.
Oh, right, that's the intent. We're making the road narrower, but we're providing additional parking.
So when they park in the driveway, will they stick out into the sidewalk?
No, sir. The only driveways on this depiction that don't meet that 20 foot are the 11 southernmost single-family residences on Moselle. All the duplexes, all the triplexes meet that 20 foot.
Thank you.
So staff needs to clarify something really quick. The original request did not ask for a reduced driveway length. The City of Coeur d'Alene's code requires a 20-foot from back of sidewalk or property line, whichever's greater. So at this time, I would have to look to our attorney to see if Planning Commission has the ability to make that concession at the hearing, or did that need to be made prior to this hearing?
Any other questions?
You have an answer?
Well, the answer is I think the commission does have that authority, but the commission always acts on the analysis and recommendation of staff, and apparently staff has not had an opportunity to consider that particular deviation. So commission acts at its discretion, but realizing that staff has not had an opportunity to look at that.
As an FYI, just to add to some information so you can make an informed decision, I know Mr. Lutrip asks me quite often, where's the closest one or what's similar nearby. All of Coeur d'Alene Place has an 18-foot driveway length, just so you're aware.
Peter?
I got a little snippy with you, Sean. I sort of apologize when you're talking about wanting to make a professional comment. Randy, I'm glad to hear you say what you said, that we rely on planning to make recommendations to us. So that's part of the job. So now, I think we were getting crossways, but you clarified things. So many of the things we do up here, you have reviewed them and you feel you make recommendations to us. We may not agree with the recommendations, but you give them to us. Thank you.
Any other questions for Merrill? No? Okay.
Thank you.
I have no one else signed up. I saw your hand raised. Did you want to come up and make a comment? Is it Rachel?
Yes.
Just state your name and I'll swear you in.
I'm Rachel Harris with Veritas.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go right ahead.
I just wanted to address the 18-foot comment as well. The code states, I believe, that it's 18 feet to the property line or the edge of the sidewalk, whichever is greater. And at that location, along that part of those single-family homes, the property line is 20 feet from the edge of the garage from the setback.
So the way the code reads, it's 20 feet from back of sidewalk or property line, whichever provides the greater driveway length.
The greater driveway length.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you. John, you need to come up to the podium if you... Just tell us your name and I'll swear you in.
John Butler.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Sure.
Probably, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, we had this approved, and it was more density. And in the meantime, we actually scrapped that plan because of, Mike and my partner, we actually said, honestly, we think that we need more senior housing, and particularly it could be affordable. So when you say triplex, these are, and I commend Sandy. I think they did an excellent job putting this together and laying it out. The triplexes are really designed, and they're going to be condominiumized, so people will have an opportunity to buy them if they want to. Hopefully, they'll be affordable from a rental standpoint too. But they are smaller, so we've gone from in 2004 to $165,000 as the average sale price. We're up to $330,000 today. So, I mean, it's tough for seniors to want to be able to afford to buy. So they will have that option. We don't have the plans done yet to be able to tell you what they're going to cost, but if they will have the opportunity to buy them at, I think, a pretty competitive rate. As far as Ms. Fleming, the architecture, we have hired an architect, and we really want this thing to stand out, not just to be your cookie cutter type of project. And there's an affordability issue with that too, but sure. I really think that's important. Seniors do like a gate. They like the security of a gate. There's right in Coeur d'Alene Place now, I forget what, it's off of Atlas. If you go in there, you probably know where it's at, Mike. There's a senior area there with a gate, similar lot sizes as what we have here. So I think it's a great plan. I think it's very needed. I think they'll be very affordable for people for the seniors. So, and we don't necessarily have to have the outer houses 55 and older. We thought that would be conforming with what we're trying to do in that development. So from a marketing standpoint, I think it's going to be very well received. If you have any questions, I can answer that.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Stephanie, do you have anything else you want to add? No? Okay. At this time, I'm going to close the public testimony on this and bring it to the commissioners for some discussion, and then hopefully a motion and discussion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have a little discussion.
I take it this is discussion.
I'm become more and more aware of the planned unit development, and I've become more skeptical of them in many respects. And I certainly don't embrace gates, although I am older than John. I don't embrace private roads. I would like us over time to, as a commission, discuss this stuff and come with some, maybe no changes, but at least that would give me the peace of mind that I've had discussions with my fellow commissioners and we've reached a conclusion, agreed upon conclusion. I'm not so sure we've done that per se. We've done it on an individual by individual basis. So my first respect is I not approve this. Then on the other point, on the other hand, or the third hand, is we're planning and zoning, and you need to be able to plan on us being consistent. We can't be willy-nilly. We've got to be consistent. We've got to be predictable. And if we've done this other places, I'm not so sure I agree that they're that comparable, but they may be. So I'm now fighting with myself. Do I want to get my point across, by gosh, that PUDs need to be done away with or something? Or do I want to say, no, we need to be consistent? So I don't know what the discussion is going to be, but I know that what my feeling right now is that our consistency is more important at the moment than deviation. but I just encourage us to some way talk about planned unit developments, private streets, gated communities. I live in a community we don't have fences. We're not gated. I'm a senior, and I know where my house is because it's been there since before me. There's a lot of things I see that I may not agree with, but I may very well be wrong. And there are things that I may very well be right. So with this, I believe consistency is very important with us. I would encourage us, though, at some later date to, in a study session or somehow, in a comp plan, somehow talk about private roads, gates, fences, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with that comment you made that, it's just kind of like the stock market or something like that. You want to see it tank. It tanks on uncertainty, And, the market, which is Mr. Butler here, he needs to have some sort of certainty of how we're going to act up here. He's already invested probably tens of thousands of dollars on engineering and all this sort of thing. And if we've approved Circuit at Celtis and Park Rose and Soleil and Garden Grove and on down the line, this one's pretty much similar. So I agree that, if we're going to have, some discussion on let's outlaw private streets and gates, so bring it on. Let's have that discussion. I live in one, so, I'm guilty, and I'd quickly say that, gates aren't, these gated things, maybe we don't want the whole city to go that way, but, I think what makes the city work is to have a mix and some housing choices. And, not everybody can live there because you got to be over 55, for example, or whatnot. And so it's not for everybody, and we're not going to have gates in every neighborhood of the city, but maybe some proportion. And, when I see that the city's overrun by 70% gated communities, maybe we push back or something like that. But I think this is very similar to the other developments. I think there is a silver tsunami. We'll joke about that one more time. And I do believe that this is going to be a housing product that would be in that Mocha Circle area in those tri-condo, if they're owner-occupied, which I think they want to become. That's going to provide a much more affordable price point. I'm no realtor, but I can tell you that's going to be cheaper than some of those other developments I rattled off and whatnot. It just will. They're going to be smaller, but it's going to provide those folks some of the same appeal that this development off of Atlas and Circuit and some of these others, Meadow Ranch and whatnot, give them. So a sense of place that, somehow comes with a gate. It's not all evil. People that live there, they're a tight-knit little deal. We talk up here about, having neighborhoods that are tight-knit, and that's a good thing. Well, I'll tell you, one of the evils of a gate, you can espouse that, but on the positive side, you throw a gate around people, they start talking. They start having potlucks together, and they start doing some cool things, and they watch for each other and whatnot. So there are some positives there too, and I think we ought to support this project.
Any other discussion?
I'm not opposed to. I think it does accrue some benefits to the city in housing choice, some density. Just to clarify my comment or my question about gates is, although I don't disagree that it's attractive and seniors demand it, I think at some point breaking that pattern, because I think what bothers me about the gate in this particular area is the proximity to Coeur d'Alene Place, which is not gated, and a proximity to school. So here you have this community and a school, sort of a nexus for convening and to have intergenerational interaction, which the research says benefits everybody, to have kind of a closed off area so close to a school and so close to another vibrant neighborhood seems a little bit unnatural to me, but I understand the market forces dictate otherwise. So I just wanted to clarify that particular comment. I think there are other benefits, and the idea of duplexes and triplexes, I think, is a housing type that our community needs more of. I think if they're to scale with the surrounding area, I think that's an interesting option.
Michael?
I'm going to speak to what Commissioner Ingles said early on, regarding Garden Grove and how there were quite a few citizens that were present and were here and had a chance to speak out, and they did. But here tonight, we don't have that. And so, I mean, while I can understand your concern at the time, perhaps all of our concerns, I believe, at the time, and the comments to that effect, I think also the mere fact that because the public was properly notified, all the notices were sent out as required, all that good stuff. I know Randy, that makes Randy happy, which is good. The point is, had there been more discussion, I'm sure we would be talking more about how can we change the western boundary of duplexes and triplexes up against the short portion of Sunshine Meadows. I think the only thing, so I guess what I'm really saying is since there is no representation by those folks, I take that as they don't have a problem with it. I liked what Sean did say, though, or something along the lines of what happens to that de-annexed county property to the east. What would happen if that were sold off and or developed such that there's going to perhaps be a fence all the way around it? Does that mean everybody has to come all the way back out to the main street to go back all the way up Moselle just to get to the school for those folks that have children and their families? So I don't know if that's, if we're still at the point where we can talk about, having that mid-block sidewalk, even though it might currently run up to a fence, having that drawn in somehow, some way, and maybe add that in as a condition.
I would support that.
What's that?
I would support that as a
Simply
condition.
because I think that if we're trying to really have the foresight to address the aging population and a need for a product such as this, which again, I think this is wonderful. I think we also need to consider that it is in a neighborhood where there are other homes that potentially could be built and or because of ingress egress of pedestrian traffic, we don't want to force people to have to go out of their way, whether it's via foot traffic or by car, have to make an additional circuitous route to get to where they want to end up, which is up by Prairie Avenue more than likely. So I think that might be a condition that if we were to go forward with a motion, I think that would be a thing that we should at least consider.
I'd like to mention, if that's the way that Planning Commission is leaning, we had this discussion earlier. It can be in an easement. It could be constructed later. It gets pretty difficult to do it later based upon the expectations of the neighbors that end up living there. So be very clear when that would need to be done, and it can be in an easement. It doesn't need to be a tract or something of that nature.
So in our motion, if this were to go forward, that's where it would be caught in that detail. Is that correct?
You would do the details and the conditions. Mr. Chair, I did want to point out too, so for the driveway lengths that we were not aware of until this evening on the 11 lots, while that has been done in other neighborhoods, Sean and I, in speaking this evening, we have a little bit of a concern, even though it's just a 2-foot difference from the 20-foot required because of the reasons we talked about, the students walking, potentially biking on the sidewalks, and because it wasn't specifically noted as a deviation in the staff report. So I just wanted Commission to be aware of that. That's something that in your discussions you need to determine if you're going to require the 20-foot code requirement for the driveway or if you're going to look at entertaining the shorter driveways for those 11 lots.
I suppose that would probably require a redraw of the dwelling itself such that it would be then 2 feet shorter along the frontal.
Just to where the front of the garage would be. That's correct, to make sure that there's a 20-foot parking pad.
I'm not an architect, so I don't know that exactly, but okay.
Yeah. Gates, I don't know, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. They sound good in this because it gives some security in the area for that loop street. I believe the drive street is going to be a lot of traffic eventually, depending on, as Mike said, what happens to the other piece of property around there, and that's going to just be what it is when it comes about. But right now, you know, if I was voting, I would support this because I think there is a need for this, and hopefully it'll be successful. Cost always comes up, affordability. I have no idea what it's going to cost. You don't know when this project is even going to start, and at the time of the market, it can change, and who would buy a piece of property? Affordability is up to them. So I would support this if I was voting, and those are my concerns. And as far as Peter said, you know, we can have discussions whether or not we can say no more gates in the city. I don't know if that's a possibility or not. Do we want to put some restrictions on the city? And that's going to be something that has to be discussed with legal and staff, and that's more of zoning and codes and kind of things like that. What we can do, what we can't do. So I think, yes, we have to be somewhat flexible, I feel, but again, give some direction in our comp plan to people who want to come in and do some developments and stuff like that. So that's why I think the comp plan is important. But as I said, I would support this, and if there's no more discussion, we can certainly have a motion. Whoever wants to make a motion, if there's conditions, we can put those conditions in if you wish to. So.
One more question,
more-
if I could,
more
of
discussion.
staff with respect to the 18-foot driveway depth, I guess, you call that. Did I hear correct that Coeur d'Alene Place as a whole is 18 feet?
So some of the way it was constructed, much of it provided 20-foot driveway lengths, but the PUD request allows 18 feet, and sometimes they take advantage of it. You know, it depends on lot type and what the future owner wants and that sort of thing.
I'm just trying to visualize a comparison because I'm very familiar. I mean, it's my stomping grounds. That's where I go running every morning, and I'm pretty familiar with the sidewalks. I've fallen down on numerous ones when it's slick. But you know, and some of them seem a little shallow. But I've never, and some of them serve. You know, there's no bike lanes. You know, there's no bike lanes on Sorbonne or Corsellis, or for example. And the sidewalks that are there, you know, the houses look pretty, you know, the driveways look pretty short, and I haven't fallen down because I've run into cars. I've fallen down in the ice. But I guess you know, I guess I'm saying I'm not as alarmed about that.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
Sure.
Thank you.
I will be glad to. So I'm going to start with the PUD first and say a motion that we consider this matter as a matter that has come before this commission on December 10th, 2019, there being a person present requesting approval of PUD 5-19, a request for planned unit development known as Vista Meadows PUD, a 9.925 acre parcel located between West Timberlake Loop and West Alp Street, south of Prairie Avenue and north of Coeur d'Alene Place. Motion, we adopt findings B1 through B7 statements in our worksheet. As for the findings B8, A, that we would make a finding that this proposal is in conformance with the comp plan with respect to Ramsey Woodland, suggesting in the motion that all of the objectives that are listed in the findings worksheet are supportable, with particular emphasis on objectives relating to infill, filling in an existing parcel that would discourage sprawl, use of existing infrastructure and utilities and such, providing housing choice, and variety of housing types. That B8B, that the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location setting of existing uses, that this PUD, the character and density is compatible with other surrounding development. B8C, the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site. That the topography lends itself to support this development without any significant constraints. B8D, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development would be adequately served by existing streets, public utilities, and services. This is based on the statements in the staff report by staff, water, wastewater, city engineer, that capacity of utilities, streets are adequate and available to serve this project. B8E, the proposal does provide adequate open space, 12.05% compared to the minimum of 10% gross land area. B8F, we make the finding that the off-street parking is per the city's standard of 2 stalls per unit, and so that is met. And B8G, the proposal will provide an adequate method through a homeowners association for perpetual maintenance of common property. And so the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Vista Meadows LLC for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved with the 12 conditions that I will choose not to read tonight that are in the findings worksheet, that we adopt those as well.
Mr. Chairman.
First, you have any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, before you begin,
Okay.
before you go on, the motion said as described in the application, which did not include the 18-foot driveway. So if you want to allow that, it should be included in the motion.
So that would go back to with respect that B8B, correct?
I would just put it in the order conclusion and decision where it says as described in the application.
So
at the bottom of page 4.
So to amend the verbiage that I said, so I'll say that the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Vista Meadows LLC for approval of planned unit development as described in the application and as discussed and modified tonight to include deviation for 18-foot driveway depths for the 11 single-family dwellings should be approved.
Is that okay? Okay. Any discussion on his motion? Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair, may I ask Commissioner Ingles to also amend the motion to also include as condition number 13, a mid-block pedestrian path. That will have to be reviewed at a different time, of course, to make sure that it aligns properly to, or I'm not sure exactly how the motion would be made, so that it can be open-ended enough for future consideration. Sean, I don't know how you.
It's part of block 1, right?
So if it's
Part of block 1, which would be the easterly
Easterly block 1.
blocks of lots.
So it would need to be reflected on the final plat in some form if it's to come later. So you can
By way of
provide
the
it in an
easement.
easement now and construct it later, or you could require it in an easement now and construct it with the improvements that would go in for Moselle and and the sidewalks and everything already, so.
You just dedicate it.
So I made the motion. I like the added 13th condition. I wonder if it's possible, Chair, to kind of quickly table this motion real quick. I would like to hear from the applicant real quickly of, sort of the doability of.
Well, we have a motion, we have a first. We can either amend the motion, or I can call for second, and if we don't get a second, we won't go forward on this particular one. And then I would, if you wish to have the public portion of the hearing reopened, I would have to reopen the hearing, ask the applicant to come back, ask your questions. I have no problem doing that. So right now, we have a motion for a first. I'm looking for a second.
And the motion as stated includes that 13th condition, right? As it's stated? It's an easement, but we haven't clarified what that 13th condition is.
I believe the motion is as presented in the applications with the additional condition regarding the 18-foot driveway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's the motion that we have right now.
I've just requested the amendment of it, and we've attempted it, however.
So if we get a second, we can get a second, and then we can either approve or not approve this particular motion. Hold on, Peter. And we'll see where that vote goes.
What Michael's asking, though, is amend the motion, we'll get a second, right? That's what you're requesting, amended.
Right now, we're in kind of the discussion mode of the motion, and if John, who made the motion, cares to amend his motion with an additional...
With your permission.
Oh, it's fine, it's open, yeah. If you want my permission, go ahead, but it's okay to do.
So,
it's up to John, who made the original motion.
Or not to amend it, but...
So if you want to amend your motion, besides what you said, you can amend it. If not, just mention you're not going to amend it, and then we can call for a second. So John, what would you like to do?
So where I'm struggling here is I would like to see somewhere along that east row of houses, sort of somewhere at a midpoint area, a walkthrough, right? That's roughed in or
Connectivity from the single-family dwellings to, let's say, the side where the park is going to be.
But,
No, east side.
No?
No, it's
To the east side.
Yeah.
To the large parcel to the east, in case,
That, okay.
in case.
So that is what you're
That's
talking
correct.
about.
Correct.
Okay.
To break up the 643 feet.
Here's where I'm struggling, is, what's the width of that? What's the surface going to be? Some of those kind of details. And it's difficult to design this on the fly up here. I don't know that that's good business. It doesn't give the applicant a chance to collaborate, and all of a sudden, they've already laid these out. They know what the minimum lot size need to be, the frontages need to be. There's a
Setbacks
lot of
and
moving
everything.
parts and pieces. And if we just throw a dart at this thing and say, throw a deal in there, it redesigns their whole project. Maybe it's really easy. I don't know that. But if I can't ask the question, I'm struggling just throwing that out there.
Okay.
I don't
No,
know that it's good to do design from this dais.
But there are, in our packet on page 11, there are specifications on mid-block walkways, right? So there's a path at least 8 foot wide. The required access easements or tracks must be a minimum of 15 feet wide and contain a paved path at least 8 foot wide. So I guess the question is an easement sufficient for right now? Or do we need to?
And also realize that that is for your typical subdivision without a PUD request. You do have the ability to design this as you see fit. So currently, the applicant is requesting 5 feet side yard setbacks. And so there's 10 feet between the buildings right now is what their current design is. Your typical sidewalk is 5 feet wide. So if you did something such as 2.5 feet and split that down the middle of 2 lots, those homes would have 2.5 foot encroachment of a future sidewalk. That would allow you know, that would be 5 foot wide. It's not going to be a trail. It's not going to be a full-blown 8 foot wide like you would see 8 to 10 feet along prairie, but it would provide access.
And you painted a picture to me that sounds very doable without major change to this. You know, they're not going to lose a lot or something like that. So I'll throw that in as a 13th condition, that a mid-block easement per the city's standard. What's the width?
Basically, they're requesting a deviation from that block length and mid-block walkway on the east side.
That was the request. I guess what I'm saying is through the PUD process, the Planning Commission has the ability to alter what those dimensional standards are. So you don't have to go with what the code says because it's not just a subdivision by itself. So through the PUD, you can reduce that standard to your typical driveway, your sidewalk width, which would be 5 feet. So that would not, you wouldn't have necessarily have someone right up against the side of the house. You know, they would have to design it such that, you know, somebody isn't looking through a window or something like that. But we see that in Belle Reve right now. Look at Belle Reve, the access down to, those are generally 5 feet wide and very close to the houses.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear what you're saying. To give the applicant an opportunity to speak
I'm going to stay with the original motion, 12 conditions. If it doesn't fly, so be it. But, you know, the drawings are done. It's been laid out. I can't sit here and
Okay, let's so we can try to move on. Let's see if we can get a second on John's motion without yours in there. So I have a first. I have no. How does this work? Because this is the first time I'm dealing with this. If we don't get a second, the motion doesn't go
The motion
forward,
fails.
correct?
The motion fails.
Right, and then I can open up public testimony again.
Correct.
Okay. So I have a first. I have no second. The motion does not pass. At this time, I will open up public testimony once again to give the applicant, whoever would like to come up, to address the issues that we've heard about the access. So.
5 minutes?
Sure.
To discuss it?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
And if we'd like to take a 5-minute break, if you'd like to, that's fine. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll be back. Thank you for your patience, and we'll resume our meeting. So Sandy, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Appreciate that break. We came up with two options. So I'd like to present both of those. The first thing we discussed is this 5-acre piece that sits to the east, and the fact that it is county, so it was de-annexed, it's county. If it were ever annexed into the city, of course, to be developed into anything beyond a single-family residence would come before the city. And Sean, correct me if I'm wrong on that. I suppose there could be something that could be developed there depending on what the zoning is. But upon annexation, perhaps there could be a condition that access be provided to the school, which sits here. We're a little unclear as to why someone would want to come either from this subdivision or from the south and make the connectivity over to that lot when the best connectivity, and again, we can't see it, so I can hopefully scroll down to something that'll show it, connectivity is here on a public street. So imagine if you're a kid riding your bike or you're one of the residents, we just don't know why you'd want to come through here and come into the school property when you've got access here, which is the main access. So that's number one. And then number two would be, in the event that you still see the need for the connectivity, we're happy to provide a 5-foot easement. We'd ask that that easement be developed dependent upon development of the property next door. It could stay a single-family residence for the next 20 or 30 years, but we'd provide that 5-foot easement, probably, somewhere between lots 6 and 7 or wherever you deem it to be a good fit.
So Sandy, if we're talking about the upper portion to connect, it would be beyond that that triangle piece is just an open green
I
space?
know, I need to get you there with the plat, so let me go here. Is that? Yes, okay, so now you can see Moselle. So here's where we're kind of talking about connectivity with an easement, but here is the bike path or the sidewalk.
To there, right?
Yes, and then right into the school. So you'd actually be coming into a kind of a weird part of the school anyway, which I think Stephanie may have mentioned that was parking, but I can double check with her and John. Yeah, so that's their parking lot. So it wouldn't be the best spot for a pedestrian to come in when pedestrian access is geared to come here, and it's geared to come here off of this bike trail and then in. So you'd actually be routing pedestrians and kids across and through a parking lot that is provided for staff and buses, I assume.
And if you talked about a 5-foot easement, where do you think that?
We'd be happy, somebody mentioned one of the commissioners mid-block, so we'd be happy to provide that mid-block. That's an easy enough design change that it can be added, just showing as an easement.
Do you feel mid-block
I
is okay, or
personally,
do you
I feel like it's going to be a path that's never used if it were put in. I don't know who would use it, and I think if they were using it, again, you're rethinking a circulation pattern that the school has already come forward with and deemed to be the safest. So I don't know why that would be provided. And then anyone from the south, again, would be coming up the sidewalk along Moselle or driving on that road.
Mr. Chair, if I can clarify from staff's perspective, that would be to serve if there was a future residential development for those residents and students to come through and get onto Moselle to go up to the school. Okay. So that was kind of the thought.
Okay.
It could benefit both, of course, but I think the thought was more that in the future, we're not prohibiting another residential development from getting that safer access to the school.
Okay, fair enough.
Can you do me a favor and show me where you envision the fencing around the gated part of the community? Which houses are in and which houses are out?
You bet. I'm going to ask either Merle or Rachel to come up to do that.
That'd be great.
Since
Thanks.
they did the design.
Been struggling with that.
Hi there. So in the gated portion, the gate is right here and here. Currently, fencing exists on this northern boundary. And I believe fencing would would connect to that down this side and over on this side. And then you would connect up here, and you can see where the sidewalk kind of skirts around the gate. We did that intentionally to allow access via foot for pedestrians to that park and to those trails. Obviously, there's not vehicle access, but there's pedestrian access. So there would be a break right there for the sidewalk to pass through. So the fencing would go up, could go up this direction, and then this direction, but then there would be egress with the sidewalk.
So that would be, but this is a private gated park? Or could someone walking their dog from south or north come through that pedestrian walkway and in? Or is that also a gated, locked gate for transit?
I believe
Only
that-
because I use a lot of Coeur d'Alene Place parks, and my doggie and I really like that. And it's nice to try new parks. So question, that would be just something, I'm sort of on the Peter zone, and I haven't spoken much because my brain is going, I like this, but I don't like this. And I'm struggling with that.
I think our intention was to allow anybody to be able to access the trails and utilize that.
Okay. That the neighbors across don't always have to have their key or their code or their little, now, it's an adult community, okay, so they may not have play equipment there, but there's a dog park there, so they could meet other dogs. Okay, so I was just wondering, I'm not a big fan of fences. I really don't like the fences down at Riverstone at all, but, okay. That helps, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So quick clarification for staff, because usually when PUDs come forward and smaller PUDs such as this, 9 times out of 10, the open space is private. And we just heard that it could be public. So the way that this is designed, it would restrict vehicle access, so you wouldn't get the public driving in there. But what I'm hearing is that someone walking their dog could access that public space. Or what they're saying could be public space. I just want clarification because that should
I
become a
needed it too.
condition if
That's
it
correct.
is.
It is correct.
He's correct.
Public?
You're correct that it is accessible by the public.
Walking by foot.
Yes, or with a dog or.
Okay. That helps me a little bit with this whole thing. Okay.
Okay, and then I would just ask that you possibly consider that if the property to the east is developed, that the accessibility for any kind of subdivision or PUD be, the responsibility lies with that developer more than it does our PUD, in which we've met all the conditions, obviously, the comp plan and the ordinance, so I appreciate that consideration.
So you're saying it would be reasonable if we said, you give us, you record on the final plat a 5-foot easement between blocks 6 and 7, and that's that. And then it gets recorded, and then years down the road, when the parcel to the east comes into the city,
Correct.
we have an annexation agreement and all of that sort of thing. We saddle that person with actually coming in and doing the improvements and so forth.
Through the
Solving
easement.
their accessibility.
But
Well,
the easement would be recorded and in place to accomplish
it
that.
would, and maybe the commission at the time looks at the accessibility to the north by that developer, and if there still is a need for it, then it's a backup and it's there, and we have no problem providing that.
It's not shutting the door.
So we're just putting an accommodation in place.
You are, and that's not unlike other subdivisions. I know Garden Grove had something similar, and many others that we've had where there's connectivity that's provided if it's needed. I'm asking at this time that it just be in the form of an easement, not something constructed, since we don't know when that time.
Correct, which is what Sean was really
Yes.
suggesting all along.
So thank you for that. I think we
thank
needed
you.
to get your feedback to really understand
Appreciate that.
the magnitude of what this might.
Yeah, I apologize if our intent wasn't clear, but that has been our intent all along.
I look at this as a very healthy dialogue so that we all can understand exactly, if there's any nuances that might cause a problem down the road. We
Yes.
don't want to run into any of that. There's nothing worse than the old parts of town where you walk down a sidewalk and all of a sudden there's no sidewalk. And then just on the other side of the property, 50 feet later, there's more sidewalk yet again. So I just, we shouldn't find ourselves in that predicament ever again, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, before I close public testimony on this, I want to make sure, and I'm assuming, John, you're going to be making a motion with this added last sentence to the conditions. I want to make sure it's correct and it's okay with staff, so give us a brief synopsis of that last line that we might add before I close public testimony, and the applicant might want to comment on something.
So my intent would be to float the same motion, hopefully not read the whole thing again, but just, no, council says I don't need to, so I
Yes.
just.
Yep, let's start again.
Serious?
Yeah, the other one failed. Yep.
Okay. So I would go through the whole deal again, just like I did before.
From the top.
But I would add a 13th condition that reads, a 5-foot access easement will be recorded on the final plat between lots 6 and 7 to accommodate a possible future pedestrian access to the parcel to the east of the property upon annexation.
Is that okay with legal and staff? You have a
Probably say
little
upon
confused look
annexation
on
and
your
development,
face.
because I think that was kind of the intent, was not only to bring it
Annexation
into the
and
city.
development. Yeah.
I want to get a consensus of staff and legal is
And is it okay to
That-
put the verbiage that if and when the development, if it does get in fact annexed and developed, the onus is on that developer to
I think that just
produce
takes, that'll take care of itself,
Okay,
because all
I
we're
just want to
asking
make sure
for
it was
here
part of
is
the record, so that 20 years
is
from now, we're not here to remember any of it, and it's not falling back on the current homeowner.
I think it would be helpful actually to clarify that, because for, otherwise it might be ambiguous for future staff to
Yeah,
try and
that's-
say
that's what
who
I'm
needs to
thinking.
build it.
And sometimes the city ends up holding the bag and builds it when we shouldn't be.
So it should be potentially on the de-annex portion.
okay. John, you want to give it one more shot as far as the last condition?
So, a 5-foot easement would be recorded on the final plat between lots 6 and 7 to accommodate a possible future pedestrian access of the parcel to the east of the property upon annexation and to be improved by the developer of the annexed property.
Does that sound okay for you, Randy? All right.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Sandy, if you want to come up, that's why I didn't close public testimony. I've got a question.
Commissioner Ingalls, I would
Or
just.
I don't know, since we said lot 6 and 7, I might want to give you some, not me, but perhaps some
Wiggle room.
flexibility where you just might say connectivity from the east property somewhere along. I don't know if lot 6 and 7 is better than lot 5 and 4,
I think
or,
we like 6 and 7 because it
Okay.
defines it, but I was just going to add to that block 1, just to make it perfectly clear. So lot 6 and 7, block 1, and then going back to what Ms. Anderson said when she said upon annexation and development, just in case it's never developed.
annexation and
And
development.
Correct.
Thank you.
I like it.
I think I got it.
All right, let's give it the last try before
Okay.
we close this public. And, okay,
Well, we had one more. So you had talked about as well, or I guess we had received clarification from the applicant and the representative that the public would be allowed in the park on foot.
Pedestrian.
And that's something that staff feels that
Pedestrian
would be
access.
helpful for everybody to know, and that might be an additional condition.
would that be another, not
14.
condition, but,
Condition 14,
but-
if the commission wanted to add that.
okay. So, John, now we have an additional one. So let's go back to the first one we're trying to go through. So we can read about the accessibility. Go through that one more time for me, please. And then the last one was for pedestrian access to the park through the gated
Public
area.
access to the park by foot, or
By
somehow-
foot.
something like that.
Pedestrian access.
question there, is that something that gets recorded? How does that, are we asking that that's recorded on a plat, or, I mean, how does that get?
Often we'll have projects that'll have to include some kind of signage, just saying that the public's welcome certain hours or something, I don't know, however you want to indicate that, but we could work that out
Okay,
with
John, I'm going to
them.
ask you to read those two last ones one more time, and then I'll close public.
This is getting a little complicated, folks. I just, when we start doing this up here, I'm not sure I support the 14th deal. I don't know that wouldn't be my motion, because, I think, we have these 10% open space standards. We could look at Cottage Grove, we could look at your Garden Grove and the circuit itself. The one I live in is Park Rose. The requirement is 10% open space, not public, so I don't know that that's reasonable to put that burden on these folks, that's a city park or something out there. So I don't know that, you're asking me to craft some words or whatnot. I don't want to.
All right, at this point, what I'd like to get some clarification on the accessibility to the undeveloped piece of property. So if you can read that
I've
last
got.
time.
That I can do one
Okay,
more
thank
time.
you.
Okay, so I think what we have there is a 5-foot pedestrian access easement will be recorded on the final plat between lots 6 and 7, block 1, to accommodate a possible future pedestrian path access to the parcel to the east of the property upon annexation and development. Improvement of the access pathway would be the responsibility of the annexee.
Okay. Sandy, you all right with that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Randy, are we okay with that?
I would add one word
Yes?
and call it a public pedestrian access, because we run into this up at the golf course, and we want to make sure that it's public.
A 5-foot public pedestrian access easement, blah, blah, blah.
We're all good.
I'm good with that.
Okay, I'm going to close public testimony at this time and bring it to the commissioners for a motion and/or maybe more discussion. So, John, go right ahead.
So I would like to start over with the motion, if I could, and say that PUD 5-19, this is a matter that's come before the Planning Commission on December 10th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of PUD 5-19, a request for plan unit development known as Vista Meadows PUD. Applicant is Vista Meadows LLC. Parcel is 9.925 plus or minus acre parcel located between West Timberlake Loop and West Alp Street, South of Prairie Avenue, and north of Coeur d'Alene Place PUD. Motion that we adopt findings B1 through B7, fact statements in our findings workshop, and that we adopt finding B8A, that this PUD is in conformance with the comp plan, and it is supported by it's in sync with all of the policies that are laid out in the findings worksheet. And I mentioned, with particular emphasis in supporting non-sprawl growth. This is infill that's supported with existing utilities and infrastructure and such, provides a good housing mix for seniors and such. So B8B, that the design of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses, and that would be based on the staff report, the presentation provided by Sean and the applicant, that the project is comparable and compatible with the surrounding density and architectural style and nature of the neighborhoods. B8C, the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site, and adjoining properties. We make that finding based on, again, the presentation, there being no constraints or topographical or site challenges of any sort. B8D, that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by streets, public facilities, and services. This is based on the presentation and the staff report comments from water, wastewater, fire, city engineer, and others with respect to streets and utilities and so forth, all being at adequate capacity and able to serve. B8E, that the proposal provides adequate private common open space greater than 10%. The amount, I think, is 12.05%, so private common open space area is met. B8F, off-street parking, is per the city standard of 2 stalls per unit. And B8G, and so it meets the standard, and B8G, that the proposal does provide for an adequate method of perpetual maintenance through a HOA to be approved by the city. So as a conclusion and decision, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Vista Meadows LLC for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved with the 12 conditions that are laid out in the findings worksheet. Those be adopted, and a 13th condition be added that would state a 5-foot public pedestrian access easement will be recorded on the final plat between lots 6 and 7, block 1, to accommodate possible future access to the parcel to the east of this property upon annexation and development. Improvements of the access way would be the responsibility of the future annexee.
Thank you, Commissioner Ingalls. I have a first. Do we have any discussion? Do we have a
Mr.
second?
Chair, we needed to
Hold on.
clarify
Oh.
in the motion, sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me?
but You needed to clarify in the motion that it's not as described in the application because there was the change this evening, the 18-foot driveway length on the 11.
I glossed over that. I am sorry, I didn't pick that up again. So, back to the order, conclusion, and decision that the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Vista Meadows LLC for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application and as modified tonight to include the deviation of allowing 18-foot sidewalks along 18-foot
Driveways.
driveway widths along Moselle for the 11 single-family units be approved.
Second.
Okay, we got a second. Roll call, please. Roll call, Shannon. We have a second. Roll call.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, PUD-5-19 passes. Now, please, someone else make a motion on S-5-19.
I'll get through that.
Thank you, John, very much.
This is going to go
Jot
really.
it down.
This is going to go really quick. Trust me, folks. I think. We're going to have to make the same 2 corrections here. Okay, so I'm going to try to wing that. Okay, S-5-19. This is a matter that's come before the Planning Commission on December 10th, 2019, and there being present a person requesting approval of item S-5-19, a request for a 20-lot, 6+ tract preliminary plat, Vista Meadows, first edition. Applicant is Vista Meadows LLC. location, plus or minus 9.925 acre parcel located between West Timberlake Loop and West Alp Street, south of Prairie Avenue, and north of Coeur d'Alene Place PUD. That we adopt findings B1 through B7 as statements in our findings worksheet, the statements of fact, and we adopt B7A, that all of the preliminary plat requirements have been met as determined by the city engineer. This is based on the city engineer's statement on page 2 of the staff report that all of the requirements for the preliminary plat have been met. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and utilities are adequate. And this is based on statements in the staff report as well as Sean Holmes' presentation with regard to utility availability and capacity, all being acceptable. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all of the subdivision design standards, and that and all of the subdivision improvement standards as all of those requirements recognizing the deviations approved in the PUD, including a deviation for an 18-foot driveway width allowance along...
No. Length.
Length. Thank you. What did I say, width?
Getting late.
Length, that's getting punchy. Along Moselle for the 11 single-family homes. B7D, that the lots with the proposed in the preliminary plat do meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. This is based on the staff analysis of the 78.6 PUD units are allowed compared to 68 units proposed, so that equates to 6.85 units per acre, which is allowable density. Order, conclusion, and decision. Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds that the request of Vista Meadows LLC for the preliminary plat of approval as described in the application should be approved. Special conditions applied to the motion are those 12 that are listed in the findings worksheet, which I do not choose to read, but we have all acknowledged, and a 13th condition that reads a 5-foot public pedestrian access easement will be recorded on the final plat between lots 6 and 7, block 1, to accommodate a possible future access to the parcel to the east of this property upon possible annexation and development, in which case the developer of the annexed property would assume responsibility for improvements of the access way.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ingalls. Again, I have a first.
Second.
I have a second. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Okay, S-5-19 passes. Congratulations. And I must say, I will remember this last meeting for 2019 for a while, I believe. If there is no more comments, Peter?
I move adjournment, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion for adjourn.
Wait. But usually you give the greetings and salutations to the vast audience from the commission on Christmas and New Year's.
Yes, I would, before we adjourn, I'd like to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Staff, I want to say thank you for the entire year for all your great work. That includes planning and staff. I want to, and legal, and I also want to thank my fellow commissioners. It's a pleasure for me to serve with you guys, and tonight was a great example how we all work together. So thank you very much, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Meeting adjourned.